Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the regular meeting of Fernie City Council held on November 28th at 6 p.m. Ki Suk Yukit. We acknowledge that the city of Fernie is located within Kukinamakis, the unceded territory of Yakut Atnukliat. We recognize that we live and work within their vast lands. Akanahunik are from Yakut Atnukliat and are members of the Tanaha-speaking peoples of British Columbia, Idaho, and Montana. I'll call this meeting to order, and I'll ask for a mover and a seconder for approval of the agenda and any late items. Councillor Hamilton moves, seconded by Councillor Anya Kelly. Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. And now I'll ask for a mover and a seconder for the adoption of the minutes of the previous meeting, regular council meeting held on November 14th, 2023. Moved by Councillor Nixon, seconded by Councillor Hamilton. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. I'll now open the floor to public participation. Sorry. And ask members of the public in attendance or participating electronically who wish to comment on items listed on the meeting agenda in accordance with section 3.7.3 of the procedure bylaw to address council, except speakers must not address council regarding a matter for which a public hearing must be held or has been held pursuant to the Local Government Act prior to council's consideration of the matter or adoption of the bylaw. Speakers must not address council regarding a permit for which public notice must be given or has been given pursuant to the Local Government Act prior to council's consideration of issuance of the permit, and a speaker may only address council for a maximum of 3 minutes. I'll look first to the room. Anyone who wishes to address council, please step forward and provide your name, and you have 3 minutes.
Okay, good evening. My name is Min Merritt and I'm president of the Elk Valley Rugby Club. This evening, I'm here to request that you reconsider making the amendment to bylaw 2484, item 8.2. This amendment would stop discount groups, such as not-for-profit youth groups, from applying for the discounted rate for designated storage space. Your staff are recommending that the discount does not apply to dedicated storage spaces, as it will have an impact on revenue of $11,638. This same report highlights that the revenue from leisure facilities has increased by $174,000 since 2019. I am here to represent some of the youth citizens that I'm so pleased to hear tonight from our community that you are considering squeezing that $11,600 from. Now, approximately 70% of our rugby club is youth, and we are currently using 300 square foot of storage space by Prentice Park where we play. About 250 square foot of that space is usable. If you make the amendment to bylaw 2484, we'll be charged approximately $260 per month for the shed with no facilities. I did some research to compare with other storage facilities in the region. So for comparison, Snow Valley Storage would charge $315 a month for 200 square foot. Ghost Rider Storage would charge $199 per month for 160 square foot. And if I compare to other municipalities, Elkford Municipality would charge us $105. Sparwood would charge us $0. You're suggesting charging us $260. You're much closer in line with the commercial for-profit rates. And I just want to add that we actually store equipment that we use to paint lines for our home matches. If you add up the 6 man-hours and the 8 cans of paint, I estimated that it would cost the city $412 for every home match. We have at least 3 home matches a season. So for the last 10 years, we've been quietly saving the city $1,200 at least every season. I've never brought it up. We don't care. We're happy to be a partner with the city. But tonight I feel like bringing it up. Now, Rookie Rugby provides a service for this community that absolutely fits your official community plan. We ask for no financial assistance from the city. We pay the city for the facilities that we use, and we understand that we should pay for the storage space that we use. Our volunteer coaches and fundraisers pay time.
30 seconds.
Time, expertise and sweat. We've budgeted for 1,500 for the storage unit, but based on the current bylaw, we expected to have the 50% discount. Now, I recognise that you have infrastructure that desperately needs upgrading, but we're just a bunch of volunteers providing a programme for this community on a patch of ground that's barely maintained. We're enabling you to tick off your OCP commitments. We're not costing you anything, but it feels a little unethical if you try and make a profit from groups like us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well timed. Is there anyone else in the gallery who would like to speak to an item on the agenda this evening? Seeing none, I'll turn to Ms. Rhodes. Is there? Oh, please.
Yeah, I'll speak quickly. So my name is Bram Rattay, member of the Elk Valley Rugby Club, and my 3 kids have been participants in the rookie rugby program since they were old enough to do so, 3, 6, and 9 right now. We love the program, really appreciate the fundraising efforts that the club puts in to maintain the program for the kids at the low cost that it is. They love it. It's really important to me as a parent. It's a great outlet to have the kids involved in social activity and a little bit of free time for the parents to have a coffee and socialize on the sidelines. So yeah, I think it would be great for the city and the citizens to really support making these types of youth programs as cost effective and as available as possible. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rattay. Anyone else who wishes to speak? Seeing none, Ms. Rhodes, is there anyone online? Thank you, and thank you for your input. And that leads us directly into a report from our Director of Parks, Facilities and Recreation on the Municipal Facilities and Parks User Regulation Bylaw.
Thank you, Council. So I have a quick slide presentation that I'll be going through. Bryn Burdett, Director of Finance, will be speaking to the slide related to the CPI examples of impact. So yeah, as mentioned by the Rugby Club, one of the slides is related to the dedicated storage. I also have another slide related to previously booked bookings through our user fee bylaw, and also would like to point out within the report there's some information related to designated parking and overnight camping suggested by the bylaw department that's been added. So jumping right in, if I can figure out how to go to the next slide. Okay, so a bit of a history on the bylaw progression. We presented the first draft at a committee of the whole discussion. We went away and we did some community engagement with various community groups and community partners. We developed some policies with some direction from council, made some administrative policies, and also have council policy related to sponsorship and advertising coming after the final adoption of this bylaw. The first regular meeting of council where we had the first reading was September 26th. We had one direction from the council, which is after this slide, to bring more information back to this meeting related to CPI. So that direction was to provide 3 scenarios to represent financial implications of the fee changes on representative user groups. And then I'll hand it over to Director Burdett to explain this slide.
Thank you, Director Logan. Hello, Mayor and Council. At the September 26th meeting, there was some discussion around the balance between recouping costs from user groups versus general taxation. And so there was a few attachments to your agenda package that discussed specific user groups. And we just kind of tried to assume their average hours of rental per year, and then applied the new rates to those hours and tried to provide some information on how many hours that user group could rent if their budget remained the same. And also there was some discussion around a sensitivity analysis of capping the increase, especially on high CPI years. And so in your report, I provided a few examples of just some math behind that. But essentially, if, for example, at the pool, you capped the user fee increase to 2% and our costs go up by 10% in that year, we currently recoup about a quarter of our operating costs of the pool through user fees. And so if that 10% is 8% higher than our capped user fee increase, then that subsidization percentage would remain around the same. It would go up by about 1%, in that we would only be recouping 24% from user fees. And the dollar impact of that specific example is around 17,000. So in essence, every percent that our costs go up more than our user fees go up, we're going to have to recover about $2,100 additional from the general taxpayer, as opposed to the users of that facility. And that's just the pool. The report's pretty wordy, math-based, I think. So I have, if you want other subsidy numbers from other facilities, I have that. I just didn't type them all into the report for you. Thank you.
Councillor McIsaac.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question with regards to the user fees versus tax subsidization. Is 25% typical across all of our facilities? I know that you just pulled out the one for the pool.
Yeah, that's typical for sure. Some are less, some are more, but there's none lower than 20% and none higher than 30%.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I did find the calculations quite useful, though, in terms of analyzing what the impact would be, a cap versus no cap. So it was very helpful. So I appreciate the work you put into it, Mr. Burdett.
Yeah, thank you. And then obviously that level of subsidization is a question of comfort for council, which we can also go into in more detail during the budget process too, and look at each facility line by line.
Thank you.
Not line by line, but as a whole. Yeah,
understood. Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Worship. I know that we're focusing on the aquatic center, but do we have a sum of all of the facilities? Like if we were to not go with CPI, like?
Yep. I will get that from you from my computer. It'll just take me a couple minutes or so to get that number for you.
Any other questions for Director Burdett before he tries to sit down one more time? Seeing none, Mr. Logan, back to you.
Thank you. So yeah, the next slide's the fee reductions. With the suggestion from my staff, we wanted to add this back on in front of council. There wasn't much discussion on this topic and the one following related to tech Christmas parties. So we just wanted to give this information back to council to reiterate that if the bylaw goes forward with no changes, that the fee reductions do not apply to dedicated square rentals. So there was a bit of I had to do some digging to figure out whether or not it was originally intended to apply to dedicated square foot rentals. I couldn't find anything that confirmed that. I saw some scenarios similar to what we're doing for CPI of how that might affect some groups, but nothing that specifically said that was intended to be part of that discount structure. Staff is recommending that we don't include this as part of the discount structure. We do have limited space available in facilities. Currently, all spaces are being paid for by youth groups, adult groups, for-profit groups. So, and we have been working with all these groups to bring them into compliance with the bylaw. And we have had a lot of creative discussions on how to reduce the financial burden on some groups. And we have offered different types of arrangements to reduce those types of costs. As was pointed out, we roughly do make about $30,000 worth of revenue from the dedicated spaces. And if we were to apply this discount, it would be spread out between that 10% and 50%. Specifically with rugby, I'm not sure how that would apply with the 17% of youth programming and the rest being adult. There might have to be some creative math to figure out what type of discount structure would apply to that space. But it would, if we did apply it, would result in about $11,638 of lost revenue. And I will point out again that space is a hot commodity. Most of the spaces we already have are already occupied, and there isn't much more to go around.
But sorry, in that, Mr. Logan, it used to follow that from 8.1 that it was like there's no absolutes here. It would fall to the director's discretion whether a group who was applying for the discount would receive the discount, and that was how the language could historically have been interpreted, but I don't think it was ever actively interpreted that way. Is that correct?
Yeah, through the chair, it is. This is the first time I've been requested through that language in the bylaw where a group can request the director and myself to waive the fees or apply a discount. Like I said, this is the first scenario that's come up for that. So when I did my research and I looked at the bylaw, I didn't know the right answer. I think this is a council decision, or at least to give me an understanding of how we feel on the dedicated space and how the discount should be applied. I'm very literal, and I because it doesn't say it applies, I like to think that it doesn't. So,
well, I appreciate your candor. I'd look to council for any other opinions on this subject, because it does seem to me that there is an opportunity here for you, Mr. Logan, to apply your discretion and to work with community groups who have a demonstrated need to potentially provide them with a discount. But I would look to council if anyone else has an opinion on the matter. Councillor Artie Kelly, your microphone.
Mayor Milligan through to Director Logan. Director Logan, is that $29, almost $30,000 accounted for in the total overall fees that you quote?
With the booking fees?
Yes.
I don't believe so. I would have to double check with my coordinator who provided those numbers, but I believe those are specific to revenues generated from rentals. Not dedicated space. But I might be able to confirm with Director Burdett. I don't know.
Further, Your Worship?
Further? Yeah. Please.
I do like to, I think it would be difficult for youth groups who have been accustomed to having space and having a discount because they're not for profit to suddenly be burdened. I believe Mrs. Merritt mentioned what they had budgeted and how it would impact their bottom line. Full disclosure, I was a minor hockey president for quite a long time, and we were blessed with $1 a year rental space. So I do have some sympathy for the youth groups if this is just sprung upon them. I don't really think that would be fair.
Mr. Logan?
If I may, through the chair, just to clarify that all groups since the user fee bylaw came into play in 2020, of September 2020, have been paying the dedicated square rental for the square footage they occupy in our facilities, with the exception of rugby.
Understood. Any other opinions? Seeing none, please carry on.
So the next slide is also pointing out if the bylaw continues unchanged as is. Again, this might relate back to the director's discretion, but I'm looking for a bit of a philosophy from council. So there is a part in the report that highlights in the priority of use that existing rentals, in quotations, can supersede basically the list of priorities. So every year we have a scenario which is directly related to tech booking the community center for Christmas parties. And they typically rent 9 days in total for 9 Christmas parties. However, the decorations stay up for much longer than that. We've done a change to how we bill for this space because they do occupy the space with their decorations. So we do charge them for 236 hours, which makes up almost $20,000 in revenue for the city. However, it does displace our regular user groups that are the majority of the users in that facility, and space is tight, especially for these inside recreation groups. So it is a bit of a juggling act to find a place for these user groups to continue their practices and their games and all those types of things. Luckily, tech is working with us and allowing some of these bookings to continue that may not have an impact to the decorations or impede basically sports such as volleyball. So we do have to relocate some of the sports to other facilities. But it is at a time when tryouts are happening and things are in full swing as far as indoor recreation for youth and et cetera. So I'm just bringing it to the attention of council, and basically the recommendation in here is to use my discretion and authority, which is in the bylaw. And I would suggest that limiting the tech bookings at the community center to what it is right now and not going outside of that would be a bit of a compromise. They are asking for more space next year to extend even further the dates that they occupy the community center, which will then displace more user groups for a longer period of time. I would rather keep it where it is. It seems to be working okay, but ideally we'd have a new facility where there's lots of room and everyone gets their fair share of space. We're not there yet, but eventually we will be, maybe.
I'm curious, Mr. Logan, just, and I apologize, and it's maybe my math skills are not great, but in your report, they're paying for displacement of approximately 236 hours for a total of just shy of 20,000, so $19,555 $73 in revenue. What rate is being applied to those 236 hours?
So because tech is a for-profit corporation, they pay basically the highest rate we have.
And sorry, so when I flip to the CPI chart with community center rental, which number? Forgive me, because I couldn't make the math work.
Okay, sorry, I'm not looking at I'd have to look at the report.
Because there's full facility rental, commercial non-local per hour, commercial non-local events entire day. I was just curious where what number was used to derive that.
So sorry, you're looking on page 18 of the.
I am at the moment looking at the CPI adjusted facility rental sheet, and it's, I don't look at the agenda that way, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and you can get back to me. I was just curious.
Yeah, full disclosure.
I've got it electronic.
It was finance and my coordinator who takes all the bookings and deals with all the rate charges who developed these spreadsheets in the first place. I'd have to have a look at it myself.
Yeah, no, that's I'd certainly feel it put you on the spot for that, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
I'm used to it.
Mr. Burdett.
Thank you, Mayor Elgin. This is not about that question, which I can look into here. There's a lot of rates on this sheet, as you can appreciate.
Mhm.
But to answer Councillor Nixon's question, if you extrapolate my example to all of our user fees and the related facilities, so assuming that we cap user fee increase by 2%, but our costs at every facility goes up by 10%, that would be an additional $5,000. That would have to be recouped from general taxation. And then the pool example was 2,100, just for reminder purposes. And then to expand on Councillor Adia Kelly's question, that $30,000 is included in those numbers on those reports. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Burnett. So the question before is this, whether we're comfortable limiting tax rental days.
Yeah, as I said, I'm highlighting that I do have the authority. I was just more or less asking council if that's in alignment with how they would think that I would use my authority in that situation. I feel like it's a bit of a compromise. It's the first example. However, if we create precedents with these types of reoccurring events, I could see this being an issue further down the line. This is a significant amount of time to basically hinder the use for sports in the community center, which is essentially a community gym at this point.
Yeah.
And turns into a banquet center in the month of December.
Yeah, I think recreation is its primary function. Looking at the facility certainly and its historic use. Personally, I'm comfortable with that approach. Other thoughts around the table? I see lots of nods, so I think you're okay to use your discretion in that situation.
So the recommendation in front of council is that council provides second and third reading to the Municipal Facilities and Parks User Regulation Bylaw number 2484, 2023.
Questions from council? Comments? I confess, after the impassioned comments this evening, I do struggle. Having just given you the discretion to cap the user day or the user fees at the community center for just shy of 20,000, that you not have the discretion to work with community groups to on a needs basis, on a case-by-case basis, examine their needs vis-a-vis dedicated rental space. Yeah, I do struggle with that a little bit. Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Worship. So is there a way to get around the dedicated space? Is there, like, rather than having one specific, is there a way that these user groups can limit this? Because I know that I used to be the freestyle guy, and I know that we are down at Max Turk. We have 2 trampolines down there, or we did. I'm no longer involved in freestyle. But we have a lot of big equipment in there, and I was thinking that freestyle would be charged for that. Is there a way to get around that?
Through the chair. So there's 2 different types of storage in the city. Essentially, it's dedicated square footage and shared space. So we have 2 equipment rooms, one at Max Turk and one at the community center, where various user groups share the space. It's open to anyone with a key. Dedicated storage is behind a locked door, only access to that group who's paying for the dedicated storage. We also do offer a shed rental program that's been utilized by other community groups. And then even a smaller version that groups have yet to take us up on, that's just a storage box on site. There's scenarios where portions of room have been delineated and shared between 2 groups. Yeah, I'm not sure if that answers your question, but essentially, if you're sharing the space, you don't pay. Once it's dedicated for your use, your things, your belongings, your access only, you pay the rates in the bylaw.
Thanks. Is there, well, I can't ask this, but maybe you don't know the answer, but is there any groups that would be willing to share with rugby, or is there in that area, or do you have any idea? Or I guess we can't ask rugby, but.
Through the chair, specifically with rugby, we've discussed of cutting the square footage in half, which would bring the cost roughly in half. I think it was mentioned it was $260, so it'd be half of that, $130 per month. We'd draw a line down the middle of the room, and my staff would store other equipment in there on the other half, because like I said, storage is tight. By offering more storage to user groups, that means less space for the city, tools and equipment and supplies. So,
Councillor Hamilton and Councillor McIsaac.
Thank you. Excuse me. The question that I have kind of swirling around the back of my head is potentially going to be answered in a couple agenda items, but one of the big discussions that we're talking a lot about rugby specifically here. But if we're going to be redeveloping that site, is this discussion a time-bound discussion in such as in that, in 2 years' time, that storage facility will not exist in that location potentially? And so with that in mind, I'm open to your question, Mr. Mayor, about, is there a way to allow for the director's discretion in this specific instance without opening up a can of worms to all user spaces and such? So, I'm worried that we're maybe speaking about or worried about a very specific instance that is not going to be, or is going to have a much bigger questions around where they're going to store their stuff in 2 or 3 years' time.
Yeah, fair question. I certainly don't want to speak for Mr. Logan, but I think what he'd like in the bylaws, ultimate clarity as to how these issues evolve in the future. But in my mind, giving him discretion doesn't disabuse him of that clarity. It provides the clarity he needs, in my mind. And I do worry a little bit also that, as we've heard, rugby hasn't paid anything up till now. They have, as such, developed, I expect, their program with a bit of a detrimental reliance on not paying for storage space. And I also wonder if there is a conversation that's happened about phasing in the cost of storage space, dedicated storage space, such that it isn't such a significant impact to their program in the short term. Mr. Logan?
through the chair, just a bit of a history. When the original bylaw was introduced, there was an option for all groups to apply through written letter to the city to ask for a phased implementation of the storage fees. No groups asked for that phased increase. What I can share is from my experience is a lot of groups took the space that they were in and made some hard choices and got rid of a lot of the stuff that they were storing. So the whole process made people really think about what they needed to store for their activities and what could go. And the result of that was the need for much less space, which reduced the costs. But there was a potential when the bylaw was originally put in place with the dedicated square foot rate of $10, where it could be phased in at that time.
Thank you. Councillor McIsaac.
Thank you, Worship. I was actually just going to bring up the historical phased in approach, and that I didn't know that actually what I didn't know was whether or not that was offered to rugby at the time and whether it was not taken advantage of or how they never got to start paying in the first place. But I'm a big fan of fairness and equity, and everybody's paying. I think everyone should pay. Having said that, if they didn't have the opportunity to take advantage of a phased-in approach as other groups did, then I think that should be within the discretion of the director as an option.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think that they didn't take advantage of it, is it now lost to them? I guess is the question before us. Mr. Logan.
If I may, through the chair. I would say a lot of the emphasis on cleaning up dedicated storage was specific to the arena and Max Turk. It was not socialized probably enough to the other groups. And it took some time for us to do a bit of an inventory and figure out who was where with what. And this is sort of the last loose end to tie up.
Fair enough. Councillor Shoesmith.
Thank you, Mayor Milligan. I feel we run the risk of writing a broad policy around a specific instance right here. I think we should keep that in mind.
And do you have a recommendation based on that observation?
No, actually, I don't. This is a pretty thorny issue that I'm having some hardships with.
Well, and I do wonder if provided this discretion to work with rugby, as has been suggested, and allow them to phase in, given their reliance on a $0 rental for many years, can we advance the bylaw and allow you the discretion to do that without having to significantly change the wording of the bylaw? I'd looked at Mr. Boranowski, I think, and ask if that's appropriate.
And I'm sorry, Your Worship, I was just chatting with Director Burdett on a financial question. Can I ask you to restate that one more time?
I'm
My
just
apologies.
wondering, we have the bylaws presented, and I'm wondering if we can still allow, without necessarily changing the wording of the bylaws presented, Mr. Logan, Director Logan, the discretion to work with rugby on a phased in approach such that the phase-in process is not lost to them.
I'm certainly supportive of that. I do think it is the director's responsibility to implement and enforce the bylaw as stated in the bylaw. I would ask our corporate officer, Mr. McConnell, for any considerations on that, if that's thorny, or if perhaps a amendment to the bylaw and then providing readings to the bylaw as amended would be a better course of action.
I would suggest very strongly that unless the bylaw gives the director discretion, he doesn't really have the discretion. And I appreciate Mr. Boranowski's statements there. If council wishes to give the director the discretion to do so, we should be within the bylaw for a phased-in approach. We should be considering that. Another method would be to potentially amend the bylaw to include the dedicated space rentals into the director's discretion if council so chose.
That would be my preference, personally.
And I do have a suggestion in that regard if council was to choose to do so. It would involve moving an amendment to the bylaw, a clear amendment, with and then having a seconder and then discussion on that specific amendment. I don't know if council wants me to discuss that or if Mr. Logan apparently is looking for.
Sorry to interrupt. I do feel because rugby specifically wrote a letter asking for the discount, I do have the authority within the bylaw to negotiate with them, where it be a phased-in approach or a reduced square footage.
Not if we adopt the bylaw as written, because it categorically removes dedicated space rentals from that. Yeah,
sorry, it's not as easy.
Not at all.
So the recommendation, I'm going to presume I'm being asked to read out a recommendation this way.
Please.
Okay. That council amend municipal facilities and parks user regulation bylaw number 2484/2023 by removing sections 8.1 and 8.2 and replacing them in their entirety with new 8.1 and 8.2. 8.1, renters whose demonstrated use of the municipal facility meet the program criteria for the following group categories may submit a written request to the director or designate for a facility rental fee reduction, including dedicated space rentals in accordance with Schedule A. 8.2, discounted group categories do not apply to outdoor festival infrastructure. And then the remainder, A, adult community-based programs, B, youth community-based programs, C, youth competitive-based programs, D, local reinvestment programs, and events, E, medical disability discount. Effectively removing dedicated space rentals from 8.2 and moving it up into 8.1.
Thank you. Would anyone be interested in moving that? Councillor Ramadas? Anyone seconding it? Councillor Shoesmith? Discussion. Thoughts, council? Councillor Nixon.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's fair for right now. I mean, it is pushing more sort of authority to our staff to make these decisions as well. So just to keep that a note.
Yeah, which I'm quite comfortable with. Our staff are competent professionals and as such are closer to the facts than we are and can use their discretion appropriately. Other comments? Councillor Ramadas.
I agree, Your Worship. They are closer to the action there. They can take the right decisions, and it's not a policy decision. I'm comfortable with the way it's amended now.
Other comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. Mr. Logan?
So we're still requiring some direction on the 2% as opposed to the CPI. So the existing bylaw is written out with the 2% increase in the future years. It was council's direction to investigate the CPI increase. So that's one of the directions we're looking at today and also might need to be amended in the bylaw as well.
Yeah, I think looking at the sensitivity, I think the CPI makes sense to me in terms of protecting the services provided to our user groups in the city. It feels the alternative will be, I don't like the subsidization rate language. I prefer support language. It feels a bit less, it feels a bit more community minded, a bit less economic, but it amounts to the same thing. And I think, we are again headed into budget and we would need to be sensitive to the outcomes of our budget discussions, including our tax rate and to cap it, particularly at 2%, which is pretty low, is just going to put us more and more behind in terms of the services we can deliver to the community. So I'm in favor of CPI. Councillor McIsaac and then Councillor Ramadas.
Thank you, Worship. I would support the CPI as the adjustment. I would note that other than for the most recent period, for quite a long time, the historical CPI rate's been around 2.1 anyway. So at the time that was written, the difference was moot. Just so happens that between last year and this year, the difference has gotten quite a bit more profound. That could potentially be resolved, and loath though I am to complicate the matter further, as if we weren't doing it on an annual CPI basis, but perhaps doing a rolling average of some sort that might take some of the peaks and valleys out, something worth considering. But having said that, my real support is doing the CPI versus the capped flat amount.
Thank you. Councillor Ramadas.
And to add to that, Your Worship, the CPI might even go in the opposite direction, right? So you've got the flexibility in the bylaw as it is written, how we will write it. That gives us the flexibility to go up or down as it is. So yeah. I'm in support of CPI as well.
Thank you. Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Worship. So yeah, thank you to staff for looking into this. It also gave me time to think about it as well. So and it either spreads the pain out to everybody or it gives the pain to the users. So I mean, at the end of the day, I do like the CPI, and the idea of rolling it out is a good one as well. So
Yeah, to Councillor McIsaac's point, I'm also loath to make it more complicated, but but he's absolutely right. It'll smooth out some of the ups and downs. But I wouldn't know how to advance that. I expect I'd need.
I'm going to ask for a minute or two to speak with the Director Burdett, if I could, to confirm the wording, as I'd like to know exactly how that affects the schedules in the bylaw to provide a strong recommendation for an amendment. But on that note, I've been asked to have council consider, are they asking us to move forward on the BC recreation CPI or the Canada-wide general CPI? There were the two options, and we've only talked specifically to CPI.
Yeah, that's fair.
We could get that direction.
Well, given that we're a British Columbia community, my preference would be to use the British Columbia recreation CPI number.
That would be the number that we would present in the amendment. Sorry, that would be the number we would present in the amendment that we're going to propose.
Unless I hear anything different. Yeah.
Okay. Then if I could ask for a couple of minutes to make sure I can confer.
Absolutely. We'll recess for a couple of minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rhodes. We'll reconvene. She's on it. Mr. McConnell.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. And so the staff have discussed, and what we'd like to do is get a clear amendment provision that staff be directed to amend the schedule with respect to rate increases to reflect the British Columbia, excuse me, I'll find it. I apologize. The British Columbia Recreation CPI, and to bring that back prior to second and third readings. So we would bring it back to the, so I apologize, I'm explaining it. We'll bring it back to the December 12th meeting, as the schedule is fairly substantial. We can't provide the actual schedule tonight to what that would look like, and we would rather have that attached before second and third readings occur. So we would ask that the direction be council direct staff to amend the schedule with respect to facility fee increases to reflect British Columbia Recreation CPI and to bring back for second and third readings.
Thank you. A mover? Councillor Ramirez, seconder. Councillor McIsaac, any discussion? I just want to touch on Councillor McIsaac's discussion at the break about a rolling average, which I think over time is maybe somewhere we want to get to, but it overly complicates the matter. So yeah, amending it this way I think is appropriate for now, and let's see how that works and move forward. We have long financial plans ahead of us, so we have time to adjust over time. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Thank you. Is that everything you need, Mr. Logan? Yes. Thank you. We'll move on to item number 9.1, a request for remedial action, a report from Bylaw Officer Kramer.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. The purpose of this presentation is to seek council's approval for a remedial action requirement for the fire damaged building located at 1040 Coquitlam Avenue, Fernie, British Columbia. I think council is familiar with this property as well as the building itself. It is subject of two remedial action requirements as we speak. One for the property for unsightly premises, as well as the building under our community standards bylaw as unsightly as well. So we're asking that council declare the fire damaged building located at 1040 Coquitlam Avenue, Fernie, British Columbia, hazardous condition as defined under the community charter, and impose a remedial action requirement to have the building safely demolished and removed. As I stated previously to council, bylaw services is concerned about two main things: compliance and public safety. And this falls definitely under the public safety perspective. So chronologically, on January 8, 2023, around 1350 hours, Fernie Fire Rescue responded to a fire structure at the 1040 Coquitlam Avenue. The building was severely damaged and the roof was partially collapsed. And on August 21st, 2023, building official Eric Stout provided a letter to Bylaw Services outlining his concerns with the structural integrity of the building. The report, as well as the supporting documentation, is from pages 63 to 76 in tonight's agenda for council's perusal. Quoting from building official Eric Stout, we recommend that the building be demolished prior to winter or alternatively, a structural engineer registered in the province of BC provide a report by October 16th to provide assurance on the structural integrity of the building to ensure that collapse under snow load does not occur. On August 30th, 2023, Fire Chief Brendan Morgan also provided a letter to Bylaw Services outlining his concerns as well with the structural integrity of the building, which is also attached. And I quote, Fires can weaken the structural integrity of a building, make it unsafe for occupancy. If the building is not demolished, there's a risk of collapse. The wall on the east side of the structure may collapse and is about 5 feet away from a residential occupancy. So on October 10th, 2023, I did a presentation at council, and part of that presentation was to request authorization for a structural engineering report, which was granted from Blue Rock Engineering. I can report to council on October 11th. I attended 1040 Coclow Avenue with Clark Weber and 2 colleagues of his. They were there on site for about an hour and a half and conducted their inspection. Subsequently, on October 23rd, 2023, I received the structural engineering report from Blue Rock Engineering, which is attached to the agenda, and which states, based on our observations, we recommend the building be immediately fenced off with clearly visible or no trespassing signage. If the walls are not taken down, then the northeast corner should be braced to ensure it does not move. The 3 roof bays over top of the overhead doors consist of charred wood timbers, which appear to have questionable structural integrity. These bays could likely collapse over the coming winter if not removed. On October 25th, based on the report that I received from Blue Rock Engineering, I personally served the owner of the building a letter which is attached, indicating the 2 items that required immediate attention for public safety. Specifically, the entire building be immediately fenced off with clearly visible no trespassing signage. And in the interim, the northeast corner needs to be braced to ensure it does not move. I can report to council that approximately 1400 hours today, myself and BEO Leach attended 1040 Coclow. We spoke to the owner, and there was no fencing that was placed around the building, and the northeast corner was not shored up. I can also advise council that I had served the owner of the building written notice that I would be making the presentation tonight, and also reiterated that verbally with him this afternoon. On November 9th, 2023, building official Eric Stout provided a letter to council, which is attached, and it states, "It is in my opinion that unsafe conditions are currently present at this property and immediate action by the City of Fernie Council is taken." So the recommendations or options and resolutions put for council is that council declare the fire damaged building located at 1040 Coclow Avenue, Fernie, British Columbia, a hazardous condition, impose a remedial action requirement, that the building be fenced off with clearly visible no trespassing signage, and that the building be demolished and removed. And that the owner, if he fails to do so within 31 days of the date of the imposition of this remedial action requirement, that the city shall be at liberty to enter onto the property by way of its employees, contractors, or agents to cause the fire damaged building to be demolished and removed, and that if the costs of so doing are not paid by December 31st of the year in which such costs were incurred by the city, the amount be added to the property taxes. The other option is that council do otherwise.
Thank you, Officer Kramer. Any comments, questions from council? Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. I did have one question around the previously issued unsightly premises order, and whether or not cleaning up the entirety of the site would be encompassed in this remedial action to bring it all into order, or is this strictly for the burnt building component? And if so, what is the action that we're taking for the rest of the unsightly property?
Officer Kramer, did you get all that?
Your worship, to Councillor Hamilton, this remedial action requirement will just apply to the building itself. We look at a couple of things when it comes into compliance. Unsightly premises, we work lots of times with the owners of the property, and if they're making incremental steps towards compliance, we continue down that route. Lots of times we outline the things that we want to see finished or completed and timelines for those things. But depending on the circumstances, we have the discretion to move those timelines. When it comes to public safety, our response is more immediate. So this would just apply to the fire damaged building, and it's a heightened response for us rather than just going towards incremental steps. We would have to work with the home or the property owner to see if he is going to make those immediate steps. If not, then the city of Fernie, we're going to have to step in.
Thank you, Officer Kramer. Any other questions? I did want to comment that, sorry, Councillor Schuzman, you had a question? And I don't know if it's still the case, but insurance companies used to use a 13-year-old boy as a worst case scenario to an unsecured facility because they're adventurous and they're curious. And Officer Kramer and I grew up in this town, and back in the day, a hangar collapsed in what was then the airport. And guess who was in there? A bunch of us 13-year-old boys scrounging around for stuff. And the fact that nobody was seriously injured is remarkable. And the fact that nobody's been seriously injured here is also remarkable. Your report is incredibly thorough, and I appreciate it because it's very much on point. And I'm fully supportive of this remedial action. Sorry, Councillor Schuzman.
Thank you, Mayor Milligan. I really feel very badly for the owner of this property. However, it just doesn't seem like he's going to be able to get that roof or walls down before any snow occurs. I mean, bracing and fencing is easy enough to do, but for that reason, I'd be in support of option 1 here with the kind of sadness about it, but that is what I feel.
Yeah, no, I very much appreciate that. And council from the start has not been unsympathetic to Mr. Pelosio's plight. It's, he experienced a serious loss in the fire in this building. And we're certainly not unsympathetic to that, but it is now represents a significant community hazard. And as such, he will also pay a price should something happen. And we just can't afford that. Any further discussion? I'd ask Mr. McConnell to reread the resolution, if you don't mind.
Certainly, Your Worship. The staff recommendation is that council declare the fire damaged building located at 1040 Cold Claw Avenue, Fernie, British Columbia, a hazardous condition and impose a remedial action requirement that the building be fenced off with clearly visible no trespassing signage, and that the building be demolished and removed, and that if the owner fails to do so within 31 days of that date of the imposition of this remedial action requirement, that the city shall be at liberty to enter onto the property by way of its employees, contractors, or agents to cause the fire damaged building to be demolished and removed, and that if the costs of so doing are not paid by December 31st of the year in which such costs were incurred by the city, the amount be added to property taxes.
Can I have a mover? Councillor Ramadas, seconder. Councillor Nixon, any further discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you, Officer Kramer. And thank you, Councillor Shoesmith. It is an important consideration. There are a range of human costs in situations like these, and it's important that we consider all of them. So thank you for reminding us of that. We'll move on to item 9.2, BC Hydro statutory right-of-way for the skate park, a report from project engineer Line. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. A really quick one this evening from me. Okay, now I'm already worried. Okay. So I'm here this evening to check a necessary box on the list to install lighting at the newly almost revamped skate park. I only have one slide. A bit of background, last summer, staff upgraded 3 parking areas in Main Town under a downtown parking revitalization grant. They were the First Ave newly angled parking, the dog park, and the skate park. And after that, we still had a little bit of budget left over. Not enough to revamp another parking lot area, but to try and support the ones that we had just recently redeveloped. So staff noted that the lighting at the skate park parking lot would be beneficial for evening comfort and accessibility, as there isn't a lot of overhead lighting nearby that site. And so we worked with the skate park design team to identify parking lighting along the parking lot so that it would work well with the skate park and with the parking lot. So strangely enough, for a site that's immediately beside a BC Hydro substation, there's no service connection for power there. So to provide lights for this parking lot, a new service is being installed from the BC Hydro network. The budget for this work, the lights, the servicing, and the service connection is all coming from our grant budget for the parking lots rehabilitation. I'm here tonight to request approval to begin the process of providing BC Hydro with a statutory right-of-way for the skate park property. This SRW identifies all BC Hydro appurtenances on the site. There were already 2 items on this site, a pole and a guide wire that weren't legally recognized before, but now that we have this service as well, it's all come within this one agreement. So in closing, I would like to say that BC Hydro will not be able to energize the skate park and service until the right-of-way has been executed and registered. Thank you for your time. And this image is the front of the skate park, and you're seeing one of the bases for the light poles yet to be installed.
Thank you, Ms. Line. Any questions from council? And sorry, just there's been so many reports this this meeting. Is it 2 statutory right-of-ways, or does Hydro TELUS simply piggyback on Hydro statutory right-of-way?
If I may, you are correct. TELUS piggybacks on all BC Hydro. There is no TELUS in our park right now. It is a strange thing they do.
From the days of phone booths, I suspect. Thank you. Would you mind reading the recommendation, Mr. McConnell?
Certainly, Your Worship. That council authorize the disposition of an interest in land being the grant of a statutory rights of way to BC Hydro and Power Authority and TELUS Communications, Inc. for underground utility purposes to be located on Lot 2, District Lot 4589, Kootenay District Plan 7970, 450 Pine Avenue, except parts included in Plan EPP 47008 and EPP 4707. And that council authorized the mayor and corporate officer to execute all documentation related to the statutory rights of way following the requisite public notice.
I have a mover, Councillor Audie Kelly, seconded by Councillor Nixon. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Thank you, Ms. Line. That's unanimous. This moves us on to item 9.3. Also a quick one. Fire hall site selection, a report from our Director of Asset Management. Welcome, Ms. Jansen.
Sorry, Your Worship, I would just ask for a resolution that council enter into committee of the whole.
Oh, thank you. It's on my agenda. Mr. McConnell, could you read the recommendation, please?
That council resolve into a committee of the whole. Right. I don't like honestly.
No. You don't have it with you.
No.
These extraordinary resolutions, we should highlight them in future.
Sorry, thank you. Yes, thank you. The council entered committee of the whole to discuss the fire hall site selection.
Moved by Councillor Audie Kelly, seconded by Councillor McIsaac. Any discussion? All in favor? Thank you. We are now in committee of the whole. Not at all.
Good evening, council and those in the gallery and at home. We're here tonight to provide you an update on the fire hall replacement project, specifically to discuss site selection. This has been a community-involved process, and we've learned through this process that there is no debate in the community as to the urgency of replacing our fire hall. However, there is some debate around site selection. So as you know, the existing temporary fire hall is insufficient for fire hall operations, and our current level of service for response times is reduced. We also know that our previous location at 692 3rd Avenue does not meet the current requirements of a fire hall, nor can that site meet the needs of our fire service in the future. We have a pretty aggressive timeline here with commissioning a fire hall for 2026. So a decision on site selection is critical in us advancing through the next phases of this project. Just recognizing that the city does own a limited land base that is either undeveloped or underdeveloped, and has a growing infrastructure deficit. And we talk about that continually and has come up several times this evening already. There's many competing community priorities and that intersect with the sort of the broader dialogue around site selection. So just keeping that in mind, and that has been the lens that we've used throughout this process to date. That bigger picture thinking. So with that in mind, I am just going to introduce my colleagues here. I'm joined by our consultant team leads, Samuel Alator. He is the Associate Manager of Planning with Arcadis, and he will speak tonight to the background on the project as well as the summary of the engagement process.
Thank you, and I apologize for interrupting your introduction, and welcome. But as you and I have discussed, and I apologize, I may be surprising council a little bit with this. I'm potentially going to throw a bit of a spanner in the works, and at what point should I do that?
If you wouldn't mind waiting till the end.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that clarity. I should have asked you that earlier, and I apologize that I didn't, Ms. Jansen. So carry on.
Thank you. I'm also, sorry, that one slide is missing. I'm also joined online by Susanna Pon. Susanna Pon is a civil engineer as well as a master in architecture, and she is an associate manager of architecture at Arcadis Engineering, and she will speak to the technical site analysis component of the project. We're also joined by some of our members of the community working group here in the gallery. Thank you for coming, folks. We really appreciate the support and involvement to date. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Samuel. We do welcome questions throughout, but it is a fairly lengthy presentation, and it's likely that we'll answer your questions, but if there's a burning issue, pose it. Otherwise, we'll open the floor to all kinds of questions. This is a committee of the whole portion of the meeting, so it is intended to present a wide breadth of information to you and provide you the opportunity to discuss and provide us, the project team, some direction for next steps. Thank you. Samuel?
Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Good to see you in person and good to meet you too. And as I said to Chief Morgan and Director Jansen as well. Good to finally meet them. We are here to provide you a summary of what we've heard so far through the process that we've been leading in this very important project for the community. My colleague also, Susana, will be providing some additional technical analysis that has been done on the finalist sites. As Director Jansen has very clearly described in the report prepared by administration, just some very brief background that everybody's familiar with about the status of the Fernie Fire and Emergency Response Department, right? It was previously located at the 692 3rd Avenue, which was not a purpose-built building, and it was decommissioned in 2002. And since then, it's been located and is providing services through from a temporary location out of Railway Avenue that is not necessarily appropriate for the continued service. So we're currently in the pre-planning phase, looking for that new site for that facility. Just a recap of why the project is needed. It is an essential service for the community and it's urgent for the decisions so that administration can move forward and the city to try to have an operational fire hall in the intended timeline of 2026. Some of the images that you see on this slide, if you join us for the open house, there was a video also describing some of the challenges that the fire and emergency response team had to go through whenever they response to any emergency call. And as you may know, there was an incident that night that proved the point. One of the trucks responding to a call was able to get through the tracks, but the other truck was unable and had to wait, and therefore it hindered the response to that event. In any case, part of the conversation is that the new fire hall must meet all new building codes and be able to feed the new fire equipment and allow for future growth, because we know that this is just the catching up to the growth that Fernie is anticipating in the future. And also, and importantly, be inclusive, effective, and functional, not only for the fire and emergency response team, but also to the community as a whole. Therefore, there's this opportunity for a generational investment to really make a mark and also create a building that it becomes a social hub for the rest of the community. This is just a slide to exemplify the need and the challenges that the fire response team faces. Most of the calls are on the west side of the tracks. They're currently based on the east side of the tracks. And therefore that immediately hinders the response time for another 3 or 4 minutes that could be critical in any event. So it's a long-term process in terms of the decision. We are currently in pre-planning, and there are 3 next phases to be done and by the city if we want to have an operational fire hall by 2026. As Director Jansen indicated, it's a tight timeline, but we're trying to move as fast and as with a lot of detail in where we are. We've checked a lot of the different steps that lead us to today to provide you with some of the analysis that we've done and give you some options for the site selection decision. This slide is busy and is intended to show it that way because a lot has happened since the last time that we review on the start of the project. Since then, the community working group has been formed. We've had 5 meetings with them already, very informative meetings, and I'll speak briefly on that a little bit further. We also reviewed all the responses collected through the expression of interest for potential partners. 2 of them brought on private sites that were also part of the consideration. And then, as you know, we had the open house in this building on October 26. So right now we're providing you with the feedback, but we're going to be coming back also on December 12th and later, just to be with you through as the decision is made through the process. So the engagement approach, as Director Jansen indicated, has been very open and trying to be as inclusive as possible, trying to provide a lot of information to the community. We've essentially structured into 3 steps. First, with internal stakeholders, that is the Fire and Emergency Response Department and internal business units of the city. We also reached out to key stakeholders, and that's where the community working group came together, and all those that submitted responses to the expression of interest that was put out back in July. And then we took all of that conversation to the community, and all that information that we've collected, the analysis and the discussions, leads us into the report that is before you tonight. The site selection considerations, we started with three simple guiding questions. What site is the most suitable for an efficient operation of a fire hall? What site allows us the completion of a new fire hall by the intended timeline? And what site allows us to further explore opportunities for potential partnering? So in that, let's say in that order. Then since we looked at all city-owned sites, plus the additional sites that are private that were brought forward, we created some site selection criteria that led us into, well, how do we discern which are the best sites for this process? And we came to these 6 fundamental conditions. Location west of the CPR tracks, location outside of the floodplain, since the fire hall needs to be a post-disaster facility, and located between the 2 bridges on Highway 3. Minimum of 1.5 acres, and I know that has been a point of discussion, but my colleague is going to be providing additional detail on that briefly. We focus more on city-owned sites, plus any private sites that were brought through the EOI process. Free of encumbrances to prompt development to meet the timeline. Prioritize the best possible response times to support the fire department. And then we went into the technical site analysis for the 2 finalist sites, and my colleague will be going into that in detail. In summary, what we've heard so far, and I'd like to take a moment to recognize the very valuable advice and commitment of the community working group, and some of the members are here. The discussions and the insight that they provided has been very enriching to the community, to the process overall. And while we were going through the review of the different sites, the focus was mostly on the long-term benefits for the community, with a priority on enhanced emergency service facility within the desired timeline. There was also a broader understanding and discussion about why the minimum size that was being recommended and what were the requirements for the fire hall, in addition to potential partnering opportunities. And based on that information, the community working group ended up favoring the location on, or at least the site 2, located on 15th Street. The fire and emergency response team also very engaged and committed through the leadership of Chief Morgan. They stressed all the needs that they currently have and the challenges that they face to provide that service. And the internal business units provided additional angles of analysis from the different points of use of administration, particularly focusing on the efficiency. How do we make the most efficient use of the city resources that you have available? The finalist 2 sites, as you are aware, are 902 2nd Avenue, which has some 30-meter setback because it's so close to the rail. And the portion only of 1500 5th Avenue, the site located next to the hospital. And I emphasize that it's only a portion of it. It excludes the portion of the Eco Garden. We know that that site is out of limits for this consideration, and it retains one of the existing ball diamonds. Yes.
The 30-meter setback for the rail, is that fully confirmed now? Like that's the distance from the rail line?
It is a recommended measure that the rail company has been advising to all the municipalities that the rail goes through. It's not that you cannot do anything on those 30 meters, but it is advisable not to have any built structures within those 30 meters. It could potentially serve for some of the operations, and my colleague will explain some of the test fit that has been done on that side. But it is a recommended policy to be followed.
Thanks. It's just that the report suggested that there was still an open question about and I think you've just explained it, it's not the 30 meters stands, but you can do certain things within that 30 meters. So thank you.
We have had very engaged response from the community. 81 people joined us in person for the open house, and everybody was given 4 opportunities to provide feedback. Provide feedback on the 2 sites, provide information on opinions about potential co-use opportunities, and provide any additional comments that they would feel that was appropriate. We got an even a stronger reply through the online survey that was extended from October 27, the day after the open house, until November 6th. 673 visitors, 450 responses, 154 people downloaded all the house materials and provided all their comments. I think that was a very good response from the community based on other exercises that we've done similarly in other locations. So we collected a lot of information. And this slide is just to summarize the process that we follow to gather and organize it and make sense of it. So first, we sorted all the comments that we received, likes, dislikes, general comments. We tried to identify possible themes. And the example that is shown is just a random example, a comment that related to a theme of location preference, how many times that comment came about. That is further detailed in the reports that have been submitted to the city. In summary, what we've heard in the in-person open house, site 1, the central location was favored, but there was a general recognition that it had limited growth and lack of co-uses, potential use to support downtown commercial growth. That was a key consideration that we heard from the community and also from the community working group as well. Site 2, it was preferred because of future development potential and proximity to already existing emergency services, but there is a significant concern for the loss of open space, obviously, and for the Paul Diamond. The co-uses suggested year-round public washrooms, childcare, and replacement of recreational facilities. And there were a number of topics provided as additional feedback that you have on the screen. The online survey was similar in that regard, only that it was probably because of people maybe reviewed the information differently. There was more concern about the loss of that open space and the loss of the Paul Diamond for site 2. There was a general question. Why didn't we consider through the process more privately owned sites? But as explained, we agreed to consider only privately owned sites that were proposed formally through the expression of interest process, right? Co-uses, emergency services, flex space, multipurpose community space, childcare, and a general concern for the cost associated and how that will reflect on everyone's tax bill when that time comes. With regards to co-use preferences, and this was very similar to the proposals for partnering that we received through the EOI process, the storage for community groups, something that was discussed in an earlier item tonight. Flex space, multipurpose community space. There seems to be a significant need for all the different community groups active in the community. Childcare came up once and once again. Climate resiliency demonstration. This is a very good comment in terms that since this is a generational opportunity to create this hub and this new building, it's also an opportunity to make it a statement, make it a landmark that really demonstrates how the city of Fernie wants to grow into the future. And there is also a great interest in non-market housing. And through the process, we've identified multiple partners that are eager to explore opportunities to partner with the city, either for this project or for other projects beyond the scope of the fire hall replacement project. And also some general comments that we received for the process. I think that you have those in your report, but I think that it's also important to recognize that the community has appreciated the fact that you, through your guidance and through administration's efforts, have provided the community an opportunity to be part of the discussion and to really provide their input and express their views of their points of view and their concerns. So that has been appreciated by the community. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Susana, unless you have any questions for me at the moment.
Councilor Ramirez.
Thanks, Your Worship. I was just wondering, the red apple keeps coming back every time we have conversation, either at the open house or, out in the community. I'm just curious, did those proponents actually do anything on the EOI? Like, did they send an expression of interest at all?
Yes, the property owner of the site proposed only the portion that is not built. That is the portion between the existing the red apple and the road right away. I believe if I recall correctly, it was 0.83 acres. And it was considered, and it was part of the assessment, and it went through the whole process of analysis. But because of size, that was the main concern that really rolled it out.
Further?
Just want to confirm, Your Worship, it's just the size that limited us from.
It was one of the leading concerns. There were other items of discussion. There's a power line on the 6th Street side, I believe. That was also part of the discussion, if I recall correctly. There was also the fact that apparently there's no direct exit onto the highway, so all operations would have to go around the back street. But in essence, and we did discuss with the property owner the possibility of including the whole site, but there was other business commitments that just couldn't allow that site in particular to meet the intended timeline.
Thank you. Your Worship, I just wanted to confirm. I knew these details, but I think there is a little bit of confusion in the community as to why this was not considered. So in the interest of community, I just asked this question.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the clarity. Thank you. And thank you for your answer.
So Susana, if you're online, I can run the presentation from you here.
Sure. Thank you. Can everybody hear me?
We can. You're a bit faint, Susanna.
Oh, okay. I will try my best to speak louder. Thank you, Samuel. Apologies that I could not be there in person today. I'm a little bit under the weather. I didn't want to share all my nice germs with everybody in the room, so hopefully you can hear me for this next portion here. So Sam provided a really good summary of the engagement process and brought us to these two finalist sites. So the next step is to actually take these two sites and dive a little deeper with a more technical analysis. So before we begin this whole section, I must clarify that this technical analysis is a comparative analysis, which means that it's a comparative analysis between the two final sites against each other and not against a set of assessment criteria like we have done for the overall site selection process. So from the engagement process, we gathered all the information and findings as Sam had shown, and we developed a set of evaluation criteria, which Sam also briefly showed in one of his slides at the beginning. So this set of evaluation criteria has its roots in the site selection criteria that narrowed down all of the available sites down to the two finalists we see right now. And based on that, the evaluation criteria will look quite similar to the site selection criteria. And how we organize the evaluation criteria is per the site analysis mandate. So this mandate has been a reoccurring theme since the beginning of the project. So the primary consideration and focus of the project is to find a new site for the fire hall. And this means that the new site meets operational requirements of the new fire hall. And the criteria 1 through 4, which I will go into in a little bit more detail later, is focused on the fire hall use. And then a secondary consideration on the site selection process is to examine the site's potential and suitability for potential co-use programs and partners that will hopefully provide an added benefit to the community. So that criteria is kind of in a section on its own. So those are criteria 5 through 8. So on the next slide, this is where we've outlined how it gets all split up. And these these criteria are outlined in more detail in the report itself. So in the essence of time, this is just a high level summary of what they are. And in terms of reviewing the findings from the comparative analysis, we'll be focusing mainly on 1 through 4A, and then touching upon 5 through 8 because our main mandate is the fire hall operation. So the fire hall operations criteria 1 through 4 has to deal with direct impacts to the fire halls and the fire department's level of service. So meaning that first and foremost, the response time and distances and accesses from the site. So we run mapping and modeling from each of these sites and compare them to each other to see how much of the city of Fernie it serves and to what extent based on its location. And then we look at the site area, and I think our presentation in this area might alleviate some of the questions that come up with, well, why a particular site requirement area for a fire station and whatnot. So I'm hoping that our presentation on this area will alleviate some of those questions and concerns. And then we take that to the next step. On each site, we start looking at testing. So we take all the operational requirements from the work we've done with Chief Morgan and the fire department. We come up with a functional program and we assign areas to it. And that's how we start determining what is possible on the site with placing and test fitting a potential building on the site. And then finally, we look at site development considerations. So this is a high-level desktop study to determine the readiness of each site for development. So items like whether the site is in proximity to utilities, water, power, gas, IT communication, and if the site is possibly contaminated or any other additional assessments would be looked at this moment through that criteria. And then we look at a different set of criteria for the community impacts and co-use opportunities. So on the next slide, we start looking at criteria 1 through 4. If Sam can go to the next slide, please. So what started off our technical analysis is the primary metric for what defines a fire department's required level of service, and that's the response time. And the response time is a function of guidelines provided in the NFPA 1720. So these are guidelines set out for all fire stations and determining their level of service. And the response time is a function of the demographics of the municipality and the community, and also the type of fire department. So whether it's a fire department that's manned by full-time career firefighters or is a composite of full-time firefighters and volunteer ones, which is the case for the city of Fernie. So we go into a little bit more detail with it in the report, but this is just a high level of the findings from that exercise. So in our conversations with Chief Morgan and the fire department, they have adopted a response time of 10 minutes. And the response time is consistent of mobilization time plus travel time. And since the City of Fernie Fire Department is a composite service made up of auxiliary firefighters, i.e. volunteer firefighters, they need a certain amount of time for these auxiliary firefighters to get to the fire hall before they are deployed to site. So the mobilization time is a little bit more than typical. Usually it's around 2 minutes. But because of the composite arrangement, it's around 4 minutes, which leaves 6 minutes of travel time from the fire hall to the incident site. So it's the 6 minutes that we use as a metric to define the preliminary service area polygons attached to each finalist site. So in the next few slides, you'll see that we use the 6 minutes and map out the service area for each of the sites. So just for comparison, and this is information we got from Chief Morgan and FFESD, the previous and current average response time. So the previous fire hall calls were being answered on average under 9 minutes, but currently in their temporary fire hall location on Railway Ave, is upwards of 12 minutes. So you can definitely see that the 12 minutes is above industry standard and guidelines as per the NFPA. And it definitely impacts level of service to the community. I just want to quickly mention another secondary metric, but I won't go through it in this presentation. It's outlined in our report, but I think it's important to also note that response distance, based on a prescribed parameter from the fire underwriter surveyors, it's 8 kilometers. So we do map out this 8 kilometers as well in the report. But in the essence of time for today, we're just mentioning here, but that is also a secondary metric that is used by insurers in determining insurance premium costs for individual properties within the city. Next slide, please. So the response travel time polygons shown on this map are a derivative of that 6-minute travel time from either site 1 or site 2, site 1 being 902, site 2 being Prentice Park. So the two polygons that are overlapped on each other kind of shows a comparative between the two sites. So location 1 is in yellow, which is 902, and the pink polygon is Prentice Park. So it's very critical to note that both sites do meet the standard response guidelines from the NFPA, and it covers the City of Fernie developed areas, meaning that if the area is accessible by the City of Fernie's actual road network, it is covered within this polygon. There are some portions of the city boundaries that are not within the polygon, but those are undeveloped areas with no mapped out network roads to get to those areas. So technically speaking, if we cannot get there, then we cannot serve there. So some of those areas outside of the polygons are undeveloped. And we look at that in the next slide here. But in terms of a comparison, site 1, which is 902, extends a little further south. Its geography, 902 is a little more south than Prentice Park, so obviously it would have a little bit more further extension to south. But what's interesting to note here, it does serve a little bit more Fernie Alpine Resort area than the Prentice Park site, which is site 2. Again, due to geography, site 2 extends further north, which provides further coverage north along Highway 3. But overall, given its location, site 1, which is 902, has a slightly further east and west coverage than site 2. And we should note that, again, both sites do meet the NFPA guidelines, and it does cover all City of Fernie developed areas. We should note that the Fernie Alpine Resort area is outside of the city boundary, so it's not bound by the same response time guidelines and parameters. It's part of a secondary rural service that is addressed in separate agreements. So Sam, if you can go to the next slide, please. So this kind of ties into the second kind of thing here, ties into potentially what these service areas could be if the future road network that's outlined in Schedule E of the city's OCP is enacted. So it gives an idea of if potentially future road networks are implemented, how these polygons react. And overall, it's the same comparison as the polygons from the existing road network. The shapes are the same. It just expands a little bit based on the expanded road system. But what's key to note here is that any future developments in those areas will have to ensure that they complete their own transportation studies to ensure that the road networks implemented at that time accommodates the fire response times. As we don't know exactly what's going to be implemented now, this is just a very preliminary high level exploration into that. Next slide, please. And as a due diligence exercise, we also compared these response time polygons with the polygons that we generated for the Hosmer service. So we understand from recent publications that the RDEK is also looking at upgrading their fire services and looking at a possible replacement site that's actually closer to the city of Fernie. So we did this due diligence exercise to see if there's any overlap between our proposed two sites and their current and their proposed replacement site. And as we can see here, there is overlap, but it's mostly on the highway. And both of the Hosmer locations, existing and replacement proposal site, stretch to the northern edges of the city of Fernie. So there are not major overlaps, but the service is continuous. So it really would not impact the level of service in the city of Fernie provided by FFESD. Next slide, please. So the second criteria that we looked at on top of the response is site area. And I know a lot of questions were brought up during the open house with regards to this aspect. So we apply the same two mandates when we're looking at the site area characteristics, is that how do we determine the site area required for this project? So first and foremost, it has to accommodate the operational requirements of the fire hall. And then secondary, looking at, any potential co-use opportunities that can be co-partners on the site. So next slide, please. So we've worked with Chief Morgan and the fire department through a couple of focus group workshops, and we developed a functional program for the fire hall. And listed here are a few of the main key components that are part of the fire hall building proper, to put it that way. So there's building components, and there's also site requirements as well. So one of the main fundamental elements that we came across with Chief Morgan and the fire department is parking. Parking to address career and volunteer firefighters. So this has a direct impact on response times because through certain scenarios they've experienced, if there's not on-site parking, unfortunately volunteers have to park down the street, sometimes a few blocks, run to the fire station, and then get all their gear up, mobilize, and then go. So that adds valuable minutes and seconds to the overall response time. So one of the key criteria is also to have sufficient on-site parking for the firefighter team. So in reviewing this functional program with FFESD, and also taking a look at industry standards for fire hall spatial planning. So we've based this on previous fire halls we have designed as well, and looking at industry standards and also NFPA guidelines and requirement. 1.5 acres is what comes out of our calculation to accommodate the functional and effective use of the fire hall, plus additional 15% growth, which we typically add on as we expect density in municipal areas to grow, and 15% allows for a certain level of growth to be addressed within that fire station and its current service area. So the next slide will show a breakdown of where the 1.5 acre comes from. So again, I must stress that the fire hall building proper itself, this includes all of the program requirements that were given to us by the fire department and what they need for them to manage their level of service and to provide the different services to the community. So that in general is about 0.35 acres. And you can see that the bigger component of the site area comes from the on-site parking and also the vehicular maneuverability around the site and having unhindered access for emergency vehicles to go in and out. So in terms of maneuverability, we'll touch upon this later, but typically, we would like to have the fire trucks not do as many turns as possible. And if turns are required, it's a 20-meter radius. So it's quite substantial to be able to provide this on site, which all adds up to kind of the site requirements outside of the building. And then we have an accommodation for any outdoor many spaces, site servicing, and obviously every site has some form of bylaw zoning requirement of the setback. So there's a factor in for that of 0.25 acres, and then again a 15% growth accommodation. So for this it would be 0.2, so that gives the 1.5 acres. And to give an idea of how this stacks up against fire stations across the board, the next slide we put together a quick summary of a couple recent projects we've completed, as well as grabbing some information from neighboring fire service facilities. So we recently completed 2 fire stations, one in the Alpine regions in Kananaskis. It's quite a bit bigger, but it has the same type of function as the City of Fernie Fire Department. The reason why its site area is 2.8 is because it does accommodate training on site, because it is in a quite rural area and they need to accommodate that in a more local perspective. The second one we have here is 1.53. So this is a fire station within the community of Calgary. It's a lot smaller, but it has a community component to it. So it's a fire station plus community spaces and a community park. So that kind of gives an idea of what's being built currently. And then when we look at fire stations in and around Fernie, you can see that 1.5 is within that range. If anything, is on the lower end of the range, because a lot of these fire halls and fire departments, it's upward of 2, sometimes almost 3 acres. And again, it's all a function of their programming, and a lot of them do have on-site training attached to them. So I hope this answers some of the questions that came out during the open house of why 1.5 acres. And it's truly based on the function and the requirement needs of the Fernie Fire Department itself. Next slide, please. So having established a site area and using that site area to reduce the overall inventory down to the 2 finalist sites, we took these 2 finalist sites and we did a high-level site test fit exercise. So a test fit is not designing a building. So we're not designing a building and or space planning. We're not figuring out how many washrooms go where. It's a high-level study assessing the feasibility of the site physically and its ability to meet these programmatic requirements. So what we take into consideration is the allowable building area. So we take a look at some of the restrictions and limitations on the site, meaning zoning bylaw setbacks, height restrictions, densities. And in the case of these 2 sites, one has a CPR rail setback, which somebody already alluded to, and the Prentice Park site, being beside the hospital helipad, also has height restrictions attached to as well. So both sites, they do have some limitations, albeit very different, but that gets taken into consideration through this test fit. And the test fit goes through 2 scenarios. So the first one, again, back to our overarching mandates, first and foremost, a fire hall program, and then looking at potential co-use opportunities of what's left after the site after we address the fire hall. Next slide, please. So the parameters that we took to the test fit is for addressing the fire hall and its operations. And these are some of the basic industry standards that all fire departments strive to have their fire hall address. First and foremost, the apparatus. So fire truck access needs to be as direct as possible to exiting the site. Straight shot to this is most desirable. So that in itself means that that access has to be separated from any public access to the fire hall, so that we deter any potential hazards and risks with conflicting traffic with the emergency vehicles. And then again, back to the safety of the emergency vehicles leaving the station. We need sufficient depth in a apron in front of the fire station, so that apparatus vehicles are not hanging halfway across the street when they're trying to leave. So they're actually being able to queue before they get onto the street as well. And I alluded to the maneuverability of 20-meter turning radius. So that adds quite a bit to the accesses in and around the site. And just reiterating that required parking is to be on site for the career and volunteer firefighters. And finally, providing extension areas that is adjacent to the apparatus space in anticipation that if density grows, they might need to get more engines or vehicles, and that there's accommodations for that. So on the next slide, this is the first test fit on site 1, which is 902. It's test fit scenario 1. So again, scenario 1 targets purely the efficient effectiveness of placement for fire hall operations. So based on the functional program that we received from the fire department and Chief Morgan, we allocated a 2-story fire hall that's centrally located on the site. The purpose of this layout is again to maximize the efficiency and operations for the fire hall itself. In this particular test fit, we have allocated all the parking to the south of the site and all access either from 10th Street or 2nd Ave centrally. And we've allocated any expansion and co-use opportunities to the northwest corner, allowing for that cornered frontage as well. Given that the site is a little bit constrained due to that 30 meter, which we show, basically we butted the building right up against the 30 meter there. So as Sam had alluded, it does not mean we can't do anything in that 30 meter between the setback and the rail. It just means that CP Rail has provided a guideline that no permanent structures should be in that zone, and for obvious reasons, derailment, sound, and whatnot. So I do know the bylaw goes and references the FCM. So that's the railway guidelines, and they all do recommend this 30 meter. But having said that, it also CP Rail also has a document that references that any municipality should have an open dialogue with CP Rail for properties that are looking into development to further investigate and determine what's most appropriate for the site. But in general, 30 meters is the guideline that is set for properties like this. So what we have done is we've placed the building in respect of that 30 meters, which ineffectively makes the site a little bit more constrained in terms of buildable area. But having said that, in the 30 meter setback, we can address a lot of other things like the turning radiuses that will get the fire trucks back into a drive-through bay. Parking can be there, certain storage can be there, outdoor services can be there. It's just they frown upon the actual built area in that zone. So this test fit scenario respects that 30 meter setback, and it also shows that even with the 30 meter setback, a fire hall can exist on the site and work quite efficiently as well. So the next slide kind of shows just the opportunities and constraints that I just went through with that test fit. And the maximum allowable height on the site as per bylaw is 12 meters, so it's approximately 4 stories. And that's important because a typical hose tower for a fire station is around 12 meters. And that also dictates how much co-use potential is on this site. So on the next slide, we look at the co-use opportunity. So for this particular site, co-use, we will have to build up. And in building up, we see that any potential co-use will have to be integrated or discussed very early on during fire station design, because accommodations will have to be made for it if the desire is to have the co-use program run in parallel with the fire station construction, or even if it's phased in the future, certain accommodations and future proofing would have to be addressed up front during the construction of the fire station itself, which would be considered the first phase. And a lot of the uses will have to be dependent on the amount of available parking as well. So in this particular test fit scenario, we are looking at approximately 10 stalls that are dedicated to the co-use aspect of the potential co-partners. And from that, when we did the test fit and doing the stories above the two-story fire station, so 2 additional stories of co-use on top of the fire station, is about 5,000 square feet of additional space. So that's mainly focused on commercial and business and office uses. Residential uses will have to be looked at in a different lens, and any parking accommodations or relaxations will have to be discussed with the planning department as well. So when we go to scenario 2, this is taking into consideration that in the future on this site, there's possible opportunities that the future road right of way for the 9th Street extension may be removed, and a possibility to be able to connect this 902 site with sites further down south, like with 802, which during the open house, we can see that through the EOI, the owners of that site, the school district, did come forward and offer an opportunity with that. But at this point, that discussion hasn't been pushed further. So this scenario is looking at in anticipation of possible growth and expansion to the south. We flipped the fire station and allocated all the expansion and co-use and tried to maximize the co-use component to the south of the site in anticipation that someday 802 and maybe this future right of way here will be lifted and the site can expand in that manner. In doing so, we do give up some concessions with this in trying to maximize the co-use function on the site. There are some not so ideal results for the fire station in that the accesses due to limited area on the site, the public and what we call private accesses are now combined. It's not ideal because the public will be driving in front of the apparatus space to get into the fire station or access the fire station. So as you can see, by reducing the fire hall area under 1.5, so this is highlighted in red, the fire hall area for this particular test fit is 1.33. We can see that there is some compromised use to the operation of fire hall in terms of access. So, but when we look at, and I just went through all of these, they're outlined in the report as well. But in the next slide for the co-use portion, you can see there's a lot more yellow, which is the co-use potential areas, as we try to maximize the site for that co-use opportunity. So for this layout, we're looking at 30 stalls of public co-use, and that generates a little bit more possible co-use areas. Again, 2 more stories on top of the fire hall. We're looking now at about 14,800 square feet of available co-use space, whether it's commercial, business, or retail. And that in itself provides a different kind of opportunity on the site. But I think the main takeaway from site 1 with these test fit scenarios is that site 1 can definitely accommodate a fire hall with some co-use opportunities. However, the co-use partners or programs will have to be coordinated really early on, well in advance, as potential partners, because any type of use, because it has to be fully integrated into the fire station to maximize the space on the site. It's an integral part of the fire hall, and any future proofing measures will have to be addressed up front. because this will impact the fire hall delivery schedule. Because you add another user, you will add another stream of information that will have to be coordinated. So it has to be properly managed for the co-use if it is deemed that it is desirable on the site to do so. So whether if that's a phased approach or build on day one of the fire hall, it will have to be properly managed. And if it is phased, it should be noted that any renovations or construction activity to add this co-use at a later date will impact fire hall operations. So with that, we took a look at site 2, did the same exercise, except for site 2, because the site is a lot bigger, we only have one scenario, because after we place the fire hall, there's actually quite a bit of room left for a community or co-use opportunity. So again, we took the same 2-story fire hall footprint and we placed it centrally for all the same reasons on site 1, to provide that access, to provide the separated public and emergency accesses from Fifth Ave. What is nice about site 2 is that given its size, it does offer a more expanded kind of back of house area where a full 20-meter radius driving circle can be accommodated for vehicle turnaround or even training, non-intrusive training in this area. So it does provide the fire station with a lot more flexibility in their operations and future growth as well. But having said that, we fully understand that this site is highly connected to existing amenities, and we are able to still provide access to the community eco gardens through their own access, give them proper parking, as well as maintain the public access from 15th Street into the area where the baseball diamond will be displaced. So in recognizing that a baseball diamond will be displaced and a well-loved amenity will have to be potentially relocated, there's still ample space here to, I think what we were discussing in some of the sessions was an amenity swap. So meaning that although the baseball diamond is displaced, there's still a lot of room to be able to provide different types of amenity spaces for the community, while still connecting to the existing baseball diamond and recreational fields. So in terms of the opportunities and constraints, it's really has to do with the amenity space there that is currently the baseball diamond that might be have to be relocated at a different location. And on the next slide is where we kind of outlined some of the summary of the opportunities and constraints. One of the constraints I mentioned briefly was the heliport. We did get a flight path study and for a neighboring site. So we did some desktop studies, but a site-specific study will have to be done on the Prentice Park site to ensure that we define the flight path height restrictions. So far from the other study, it's 29 meters, which is quite generous. But again, a site-specific one will need to be done. So the takeaway from site 2, if we go to the next site for the co-use opportunity, we're showing the fire station as a standalone building and the co-use opportunity as a standalone building. So the takeaway from here is that these two programs can either coexist, run in parallel, or be phased without having an impact on each other. So it gives ample time for the city and council and the community to explore what that community need is and have a proper engagement process for that as well. So in this particular co-use a test fit, we do understand there's existing structures on the site. So this is just one option. Other concepts in the future may retain those existing structures and plan around them, but this particular site fit is looking at maximizing the potential of the remainder of the site. So we've organized parking, I believe it's about 65 stalls, and I believe it's about almost 29,000 square feet of building four-story building in the yellow there on this particular site. So I do know that from some of our engagement sessions that a lot of parents like to drop off their kids here so that they can walk across the field to the school. This may help organize the traffic a bit with the parking and whatnot, but it just shows the potential of if the baseball diamond is displaced, there are definitely other opportunities to kind of swap that amenity to something else that is needed as well. Next slide, please. So in following this test fitting, we looked at the physical aspects of the site, and I'm not going to go through this all in detail. The reports are in our actual technical report, but from a desktop study and from ISL did also a sewer capacity review as well. They didn't find either site to have any capacity concerns. From a utility point of view, both sites are adjacent to major trunk lines, so connections should not be an issue to either site. And the next slide, in terms of environmental site assessments, this gets a little bit more trickier for site one because we did find reports on adjacent sites, neighboring sites, that there are contamination issues, be it from the proximity to the railway, and also knowing that site one, which is 902, had previous uses that are more prone to site contaminations, like a dry cleaning laundry facility where chemicals can leach into the soil, or a storage yard for railway materials, and exposed to track to the railway tracks can be exposure to creosote. So there is a potential risk that site one does have some degree of contamination. But having said that, we do recommend that both sites have proper environmental site assessment done on both, just as a due diligence to ensure that it doesn't impact or surprise the project budget and schedule, because it will take time and money to remediate if there are any issues on the site. But as of right now, site one seems to have the higher probability of being contaminated due to the previous reports on neighboring sites. And then the next slide will kind of show the other site discovery work that will be required on both sites. So a proper site survey, and again, in precedent of the environmental site assessments, environmental overviews, desktop study, and a historical resource assessment should be done on both sites, just to cover all the bases. And of course, geotechnical investigations and site surveying studies will have to be conducted specifically on each site, as well as a traffic impact assessment to review what this new development will bring in terms of impact to neighboring streets, as well as access to and from the site. And then, like I said, we won't be going into too much detail with the community impact and co-use opportunity item criteria, but for the summary for this presentation, it is the secondary consideration of the site selection process. So we do go into this in more detail in our report, but in this presentation, we just briefly outlined some of the parameters that we use to compare the two sites to each other. So again, first and foremost, it has to meet all the operation needs of the fire hall, and then measured against the flexibility to be able to accommodate for any co-use partners or opportunities in the future. And again, it's a comparison of the site's potential and capacity for any community benefit use, and the scoring and weighting of these four criteria are included in the site comparison matrix. So co-use opportunities, our working groups in this, and the working groups with the city has identified, as Sam had allocated in one of the slides, that the bar chart were what was the top running co-use kind of opportunities that were brought to the table, and it kind of aligned with what the city was looking at too. And It had to look at emergency service agencies that currently actually receive funding from the city itself. So these can be considered as co-use partners in an effort to address resource efficiencies, as Director Jansen had indicated that the land base is the inventory is quite narrow at the moment. So operate the emergency operations center is a primary co-use partner. A lot of fire stations we have designed lately have incorporated, and you'll see in them. It's considered share space with larger meeting areas. So it's a great opportunity to be able to address that as well, if possible. And from what I understand, RCMP and Search and Rescue also receive funding in terms of, I guess, rented facilities from the city. So it is also another opportunity to include them in the fire hall project if possible. And then looking at further beyond that, any community benefit co-uses and opportunities that both addresses a certain community need. From what I hear, childcare facilities are in high demand. Affordable housing is also a big ticket item there, but also creating an attractive project that could position the city to attract grant funding from different sources. So a lot of fire stations that we have been working on lately have a mandated community program to it, be it a park, community park, or community meeting rooms that are bookable through anybody, and also council chambers as well. So those are a few of the things that that we could look at if we bring it into concept design after a site is selected. So I'm going to go through this a little bit more quickly, mindful of everybody's time. So for those 8 criteria that we went through, we summarized them in a site comparison matrix, and then we assigned it a weighted score to be able to compare the 2 sites against each other. So for the criteria that has a direct impact to fire hall operations and the delivery of it for 2026, we gave it a higher a weighting of 2.0, and other comparative data is weighted at 1. And then we scored each site against these criteria at each other. So if the site received a score of 0, it means the other site had a slight advantage over it, or sometimes both sites received a score of 0 because there was no significant disparity between them. If a site scored slightly, has a slight advantage over the other, it was scored 0.5. And if one site had, if it better met that criteria far over the other, it received a scoring of 1. So the entire site matrix is in our report. It's quite extensive, and it has subcategories within each of the valuing criteria. But for this presentation on the next slide, we condensed it into the 8 criteria, and you can see with the scoring, site 2 came out on top through both the fire hall and the community co-use sections. It should be noted that site 1 scored fairly high in the site area characteristics, and one of the main factors for that is the fact that it is already zoned for fire hall use, whereas site 2 will have to undergo policy amendments to the bylaw and the OCP. So this is a quick summary of the big chart that's in the report. And on the next slide, we just show a summary of the final scoring. So it is important to note that both sites do meet the program requirements for fire hall and are located to achieve the mandated level of service prescribed by the fire department itself. Both are development ready in the aspect that they are adjacent to main trunks within the city, but it's quite evident that one site does provide more flexibility for current and future needs. So from a technical standpoint, and we have to emphasize this from a technical standpoint through this analysis, it shows that Site 2 Prentice Park does have a higher scoring and offers more flexibility in terms of fire hall project, as well as the additional community programs on the site. So like I said, both site works. Site 1 works for the fire hall, but Site 2 works better for the fire hall and the community uses put together. And just summarizing kind of the reasons why for Site 2 based on the analysis is it does meet all the NFPA and FUS response requirements, and it covers all the developed areas of the city of Fernie. It is closer to Highway 3 than Site 1, so there's a shorter distance in terms of access. And as evident through the test fits, the larger site area and less setback constraints gives it more flexibility in site layout and the ability to plan for the future, which is above and which the growth rate can be above and beyond the anticipated 15% growth rate, which is kind of industry standard when we apply to spatial planning for fire stations. The site itself has an added benefit of having more outdoor training area. And then if we do go with Site 2, then what are the next steps to move it along? Again, as I alluded, there is a planning policy amendment process that will have to be addressed. The OCP amendment will have to be addressed, as well as a bylaw requirement to amend to support a fire development site, and then amendment to the right of reverter to charge to permit emergency services and co-uses on the site as well. Another added process that can run in parallel with the project is the city may need to find a replacement site for the displaced Space Mall diamond. But on the site, it can run in parallel while the city takes a look at its land base, taking into account current and future recreational needs. And like we alluded to before, for both sites, actually, any co-use and community consultation will have to keep on going. We will be building up on our EOI respondents and seeing, if there's additional avenues that we can look further down there. What's nice about this site is that it is large enough to allow this consultation to occur on a timeline on its own, independent of the fire hall project. So the potential co-use component can be separated from the fire hall itself. And then finally, taking it through referendum consultation. So this will have to happen whether it's Site 1 or Site 2. And the next slide is also in the report, but just provides an overall idea of the cost that comes with some of the next step site discovery work that will need to happen. So this kind of outlines some of those site development, additional studies and investigations that need to happen, along with the communication and engagement consultant that will have to be retained during the referendum process. For Site 2, an aeronautic study will be highly recommended, again, to review the flight path over the site as it is adjacent to the hospital helipad. And so just for comparison, if Site 1 was chosen, the next steps for it would be on the next slide. So it's quite similar to Site 2, except that the planning policy reviews is not as extensive as required for Site 2. We can look at different historic downtown development permit schedules for form and character, as Site 1 is a big part of the historic downtown area, being on the north edge. Looking into possible requirements to consolidate lots to dissolve the interior lot lines. Right now, currently, is this to have one big site for development. The co-use community consultant portion here is, again, as I mentioned, pretty key because any co-use opportunities or partners will have to be integrated with the fire hall due to the constraints. So in building up, we will have to future-proof it pretty quickly. And again, the referendum consultation will be required for both. And the next slide just shows, again, potential costs that comes with that. So basically, between the two, the next site discovery steps are pretty much similar. it may be the schedule that will fluctuate between the two sites depending on exactly what has to be done to get both sites ready for development. And just to end off our presentation here today, I know everybody's been really patient with me. Thank you. The next steps is that right now we're today at November 28th, our report to council with our feedback and recommendations. And we're expecting council to take away all this information, digest it, and possibly have questions between now and hopefully December 12th, when we have our next session with the group to seek a decision on site selection. And then from there, we move into the other phases of taking the selected site, doing some concept design, getting a high level cost estimate, looking at funding strategies, and then moving on into the new year to finalizing site concept, get a tighter cost estimation, and developing a funding strategy plan that the city can move on and taking into the next steps. Thank you so much for your time. I know it's a lot to digest, but there's a lot of work that went in with the community itself as well. So we just want to make sure that all the information is highlighted, and again, all the details are in the report. So I'm just going to hand it back to Director Jensen, and if there's any questions, we'll be glad to answer them.
Thank you, Susanna. That was very thorough. I appreciate it. And your voice held out through the whole thing, so I appreciate that as well.
I'm glad it did.
Are there any questions immediately from council? Just looking around. Seeing none, back to you, Director Jensen.
Thank you, Your Worship. That was like almost an hour and no questions. I'm quite surprised. This is a committee meeting agenda item here, so questions about the process or about the technical report. Otherwise, our intent is to bring forward the resolution on the report here is to direct staff to bring forward a report to the December 12th meeting to make a decision on site selection. So,
thank you. Well, there is the one item, of course, that I've raised with you already, and for the benefit of council, that through my office, I did receive outreach from Interior Health about the potential for co-locating the fire hall in the existing Elk Valley Regional Hospital site, which didn't come through the EOI process, expression of interest process, but it struck me, and I think if I'm not wrong, your initial look at it from a Google Maps kind of view, it looks like it would potentially fit. And it, as it is, and I'm sensitive, particularly to Chief Morgan and his team, to get them out of where they are currently operating. And I, having spent time over there and having watched the video and understand the constraints, my intention is not to unduly push the timeline back, but as it is, as we've used this phrase more and more, a 50-year decision or a generational decision, it feels like an opportunity worth investigating. And to that effect, I have developed a resolution for consideration for council, but open to questions as well. Councillor Ramadas.
Sorry, Your Worship, can you repeat exactly what the proposal is from Interior Health?
That we would co-locate the new fire hall on the same site as the existing Elk Valley Regional Hospital, which is the hospital here in Fernie. I know, new information late in the game. Councillor Adi Kelly and Councillor Shoesmith.
Your Worship, I think you're correct. It's a generational decision. Some of us won't be here when the new fire hall is decommissioned. A lot of us will be maybe at St. Margaret's. But I think it's vital that I really do appreciate that we do need a new fire hall. I don't think that it's fair to say there is no debate in the community because there is some still. But I think we would be remiss to not look at absolutely every opportunity and make the very best decision we can. I think think slow and act fast would be prudent.
Thank you. Councillor Shoesmith.
Thank you, Mayor Milligan. There's no doubt in my mind that we need a new fire hall and we need one sooner rather than later. However, given the two options presented and the possibility of a referendum, I feel that if we jump the gun on one of these or the other and then fail the referendum, we'll have lost time. And to that end, and respecting that this is a really well put together and extensive and exhaustive report and a very drawn out and involved process, I do feel we need to consider options such as the hospital. Thank you.
Thank you. And well, actually, with the help of Deputy Clerk Daniel and Mr. McConnell, I tried to craft the resolution such that it's we can abandon it in short order if it appears through the site fit criteria that it is not a good fit, and that we not unduly waste time on the process. Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. It's certainly a thought-provoking, late in the game play-making decision. But one of the questions that is always been in the back of my mind about Site 2, about that hospital area, is our floodplain mapping. And you've already said it tonight, it's a generational decision, it's a 50-year decision. I'm very concerned about that location as far as looking back at how our floodplain mapping has changed and flood elevations have grown over the last 10, 15, 20, 50 years. And what are the next 50 years going to look like in that area? Are we going to find ourselves in a position in 5, 10, 15 years where that's in the middle of our floodplain with the expected flood returns due to climate change or what have you? So I'm interested to see how the site fit and all that might play into this, but I also still harbor a lot of concerns about being down in that area.
Yeah, understood. And I think the current floodplain mapping actually raised some eyebrows even for the Prentice Park site. It is out of the current floodplain mapping, but to Councillor Hamilton's point, we need to be cognizant that could change in the future.
If I may, if you look at the floodplain mapping, it follows the contour of the road that goes right around the hospital site right now, which doesn't have a whole lot of elevation gain up to that hospital site.
Yeah. And I'm almost certain Director Lennox would keep us on track in terms of locating something in the floodplain or not. Councillor McIsaac.
Thank you, Your Worship. Do we have any kind of rough ballpark of should we decide to throw this in and have a review of it, when we would get back a rough answer of yes, it will fit or not fit, and so that we can move on with the process? Do we have a sense of that?
Ms. Jensen?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Councillor McIsaac. Putting through another site through the review process would require a change order with our consultant. And however, we've got established criteria and a process with engaging through our staff teams and the community working group to ensure that we're maintaining that same level of rigor and due diligence in terms of engagement. But that would put us likely into a January decision on site selection.
Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. Do we have an estimate on what the cost of such a change order and running this new program might be?
Thank you. I will defer that over to Susanna for the Arcadis cost. However, that doesn't include the additional resources for our staff team to shift our priorities. But certainly I'm similar in nature to the mayor. I'm a blue sky thinker, and I certainly don't want the community thinking that we haven't turned over all the stones on sites. We did directly engage Interior Health through the request for expression of interest process. And at that time, they weren't they did not bring anything forward. However, we were looking through the lens of their emergency services aspect of their business and not the hospital. So it's an interesting proposal. I have to say, we've gone through a detailed process on site selection. And although I don't want to delay because we do have significant work to kick off, and you'll likely see us back here December 12th anyways, looking for a budget amendment to fund all of those next steps. Regardless of site selection, we'll need to be doing site investigations and can assign a budget amount for that placeholder so that we're not delayed. But a delay on site selection will delay the work of Arcadis in terms of prepping for the concept design and our costing and funding strategy implementation component. So with that, I'll just hand it back over to Susanna really quickly to speak to the Arcadis cost on doing that review.
Right. Without having looked at that site and going through all the criteria, I would, don't hold me to me today, but I would say it's in the order of probably 20 to maybe 25,000 with a 4 to 6 week delay. And of course, we'd be looking at efficiencies. If we already have some of the information, that would make the time less. But I think, like Director Jensen has saying, we do have to go through that whole due diligence process with all the groups and review it in the same way and give it the same care as we did with these two sites.
Thank you, Susanna. Councillor Ramadas.
Thanks, Your Worship. Again, really good job. It's exhaustive, and we've got this work done. So this is not going to waste, regardless of what our decision is going to be in the future. However, I just want to explore this expression of interest concept a little bit. In light of what you just mentioned, that Interior Health is interested in this, I'm just wondering, is the EOI process missed other potential partners? Is there a way to actually kind of think about that once again, maybe put it out once again and see if there are other people whom we might have missed? Just a thought.
Yeah, I appreciate the thought. I worry a little bit about going back to market, as it were. This one, and I also appreciate it's come in late in the game. To Director Jansen's point about turning over stones, this is a stone that's kind of rolled in our path. Let's have a look at it. And otherwise, I wouldn't recommend, in terms of the potential delay, personally going to another expression of interest. I think that would create a number of challenges for this project, full stop. Councillor Audia Kelly and then Councillor Hamilton. Okay.
I'm just wondering, like, how confident are we that the first EOI really hit everyone? Like, that's the part that I'm unclear.
Director Jensen.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Councillor Ramadas. At the outset of this project, our internal staff project team did a stakeholder identification process, and we direct contacted all organizations that are potential community partners in this or owned land in the public sector, and then we advertised for the private sector sites. Looking at our 6 criteria and looking at the existing land base and the private land available, there isn't actually very many options in terms of undeveloped or underdeveloped sites within that geographic area that we've identified between the 2 bridges on the west side of the tracks outside of the floodplain. As an example, we're looking at somewhere along the highway corridor, and when we drive along the highway corridor, there aren't really a 1.5 acre sites available. So we are confident that we reached out to organizations. We're cognizant of the timeline of organizations doing capital planning and looking at expansions of their services. Part of the piece around Prentice Park being attractive in terms of its flexibility is that there is a little bit more space for expansion and looking into the future at opportunities. We all know we do fund RCMP right now to the tune of a little over $100,000 a year on rent alone for their facilities. That's based on our percentage of the complement here, and it's still left to be told whether we'll be on the hook for replacing their facilities in the future. We also do fund the rent for the search and rescue and do own that building, and there's not currently any provincial funding, capital funding available for that programming to replace facilities. And they do fund, the province funds operationally, but generally search and rescue across the province is relying on municipal tax base and fundraising within the community. So looking at the larger site does provide us opportunities from like a holistic asset management lens, looking at where our risks are as well. So I've gone a little bit further beyond that REOI process, but we contacted all of the stakeholders that are in some way connected with our services or through agreements, and try to encourage those folks. I personally sat down in meetings, phoned people, emailed people, not just locally here, but regionally with BC Ambulance Service, looking at who is the responsible folks that are in charge of the capital planning here, not just the local contacts that are delivering services.
Councillor Audia Kelly.
Thanks, Mayor Milligan. I think in light of the fact that this is a generational decision, 4 to 6 weeks and 20 to 25,000, if it saves us a failed referendum, which would cause us a lot more delay in money, I think it's a good risk to take. And I also would like to point out that we are having a town hall on December 14th, and people may wish to speak up about how they feel at that time as well.
Thank you. And Councillor Hamilton, and then Councillor Nixon.
Thank you. Question around timelines and kind of the project management of this, and cognizant of knowing that 4 to 6 weeks on a decision at the front end might not equate to 4 to 6 weeks delay at the back end. So I'm just curious from staff's timeline and development perspective, is a 4 to 6 week delay going to delay each decision 4 to 6 weeks, or is it going to have a multiplier effect such that, you know, delaying 4 to 6 weeks now could mean a year or two in the back end?
Thank you, Your Worship, through to Councillor Hamilton. There is certainly a multiplier effect. However, we've looked at some opportunities in terms of advancing and procuring services for various site investigations, regardless of which site. We're going to have to do site survey, geotechnical analysis, site disclosure statement, and any potential environmental assessment. So there's a lot of commonalities regardless of site where we could use flexible language within our procurement process to proceed with that. However, a delay on the site selection will delay the concept design, the additional engagement with all of the REOI respondents who are patiently waiting for us to come back to them with discussion on more opportunities here. And then ultimately the delay on the cost of the project and positioning ourselves for applying for senior government funding.
Further?
No, not further to that question. It's another question.
Well,
so
hang on a sec.
Yeah.
Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Your Worship. That was quite the spanner that you're throwing in the machine here. I do have a few reservations about delaying this project. I know how much work has been put in. You can see this report. It's quite exhaustive. However, you know, I'm listening to my colleagues around the table, generational decision, etc. And I have a lot of reservations about Interior Health as well, just in the fact that I don't know how is this going to work. Like, it's very interesting. Thank you for bringing it to the table.
You're welcome. Ms. Jansen.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to clarify, there is a possibility that there, this particular site won't meet the 6 criteria, and that we can put that to bed and continue on. So should it meet all 6, the ones that are flagging that I've flagged are, there isn't enough room on that site without significant change to the entire access and parking for the current hospital. That said, they have more land on the other side, and we haven't done any test fitting or really analyzed that site. But full stop, that would need to be required to be able to accommodate the size. And then the second one is, would it meet a timeline where we've established 2026? We're not at this point. A meeting with the right people from Interior Health would uncover whether or not they're ready to come to the table with capital funding for a major improvement at their site or not. And so we could explore it certainly first through an engagement with the right players at the table.
Yeah, reflecting on Councillor Nixon's comment, the current landowner would have to be ready and able in such a way that it wouldn't delay our timeline. So that would certainly have to be an additional criteria in this circumstance. Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. The other point that I wanted to bring up was kind of circling back to the initial 2 sites, kind of ignoring the 3rd site for a moment, but it does play into the philosophical discussion that I feel we need to be having around the table of, if we're selecting between site 1 or site 2, potentially a site 3, and the weighting that the report currently has towards co-use spaces. With the expression of interest we received from 802, the site 2 is getting higher value because it can be co-developed, it can be phased approach. One thing we learned when we went to Creston was that any space attached to the building needs to meet all of the post-disaster building site requirements. So I don't know where we're going to get funding to build housing above that meets that criteria. I don't know where we're going to get much funding to build really anything that's going to meet into that criteria, or whether the taxpayer is going to want to fund that level of code build. So site 2 is essentially, it's 1 lot, but it's going to be 2 different build phases. And are we pulling people away from the downtown core by building over there? As one of the public participation presenters this evening spoke about, was it's great to drop off your kids at an activity and then go have a coffee, go have a beer, what have you, socialize with other parents for an hour or 2. For me, that is one of the key aspects of looking at site 1 and any potential co-uses for the community, is bringing more people to the downtown core, bringing more business for those local businesses. Drop your kid off, go do some shopping on a Thursday night, or go meet up with a friend for a coffee, or go do your groceries right there. So I feel like we need to be having a bit of that discussion as well this evening before we start thinking too much about specifics in our site selection.
Comments around the table? Any? Because because the co-use discussion with the 902 site presents kind of an accelerated timeline, and it potentially limits what those ultimate co-uses would be. So to suggest at this juncture that we're going to enhance the commercial downtown core by selecting co-uses that would do that, I'm not sure it follows necessarily, given the accelerated timeline that would require. And further, removing it, as has already been pointed out by a number of community members, as a potentially developable commercial space for downtown, actually limits the access to commercial space for business growth in that region. It's already been pointed out by a number of people during this process. So yeah, I don't know what else to say to that.
I guess my question is more, we're focused on building a fire hall. That is our focus. whether it's site 1 or site 2, what those co-uses are going to be, essentially doesn't matter when we're talking about building a fire hall, because in either location, those co-uses are not going to be attached to that fire hall. They're going to end up being separate buildings, whether they're on the same site or whether they're on what is currently a property just adjacent. I feel that the emphasis on co-uses to the specific site is an irrelevant conversation at this point, because we need to get a fire hall built first and foremost.
Well, I think, and unless I misunderstood something in the report, I thought the co-uses, particularly for 902, had to be developed concurrently rather than phased, because there are certain criteria required for the removal of the road right away, the potential and continued engagement with the school district in terms of other co-uses that could potentially be built down there. There's an additional process there, as I understood it, versus the site number 2, the Prentice Park site. We can build our fire hall and we can build co-uses at a later date, phased, such that we don't impact the timeline of the building of the fire hall.
If I may follow up.
Okay.
And that is precisely what I'm arguing, is that we are going to be needing to build a secondary building. The co-uses are not going to be attached per se to the fire hall. They're going to be in a phased aspect, ancillary to the fire hall on the same site.
Except in the case of 902, when they would be up, they would be in addition to the existing structure.
Or what I'm suggesting is that based on the expression of interest from 802's landowners, we could essentially extend that property and consider the development of 802 into those co-use spaces, much like we would if we were on the site to the Fifth Ave property.
Ms. Jansen, do you want to comment?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. As Susanna Pon, our architect, described each of the sites, each site provides opportunity for slightly different co-uses, and certainly the Prentice Park site, being the larger space, does accommodate for that future development opportunity. In the downtown on the 902 site, on that site specifically, developing it as just a purpose-built fire station is an option. However, the site could be optimized in terms of adding density and building up. The site test fit that was presented here tonight showed 2 additional floors of co-use. And just for a point of clarity, we're not suggesting that the co-use is necessarily funded by the City of Fernie tax base. We're looking at the REOI looked at shared capital funding opportunities. So the attractive, as we move into the next phases of this project, we'll be looking at real opportunities, organizations that have access to capital funding now to be able to provide that opportunity to co-use, to develop a concept design for site 1 downtown, and alternatively, those that could be also at the table now, or also identify future opportunities at the Prentice Park site. So I'm not sure if I want to, Susanna may want to add any additional context in terms of the phasing versus construction in line with the fire station.
Yeah, I think to clarify, on site 902, as we looked at the test fit, is the assumption that right now that site 802 and the adjacent sites to the south are not in play at the moment. So that's why we have to build up. And in the event of building up, the fire station will have to be future-proofed, post-disaster proof for any component that sits on. Can it be done? Definitely. We've seen it done. But it does come with certain schedule and cost implications to the project itself. So like I said, if a co-use was to happen on 902, not taking into account that the expansion will or will not happen, but just looking at the site itself, there will be impacts to the fire station in terms of scheduling and any future, if the co-use is phased, renovations and construction will have to happen on the first phase, which is fire hall, and that will disrupt the operations of the fire department itself. Whereas site 2, any co-use can happen independently. So you don't have to worry about post-disaster construction with that particular use, unless you want to add something to the fire station. That can be a possibility as well. But site 2 just allows for a more independent and flexible process.
Councillor Shoesmith. Thank you, Susanna.
Thank you, Mayor Milligan. To Councillor Hamilton's point, and bearing in mind Director Jansen's spiel there, there's two groups that we really need to be considering here, which is the firefighters and the order of complexity that we're creating with any potential co-use site. I mean, to Councillor Hamilton's point, the point here is to build a fire hall first. That is the core focus of what we're doing. The second group of people we need to be considering is the taxpayer. I feel adding an order of complexity and a bunch of cost is going to have to go back to the taxpayer and be justified. And that might be a pretty difficult discussion if we're going to attempt to make the fire hall and. Thank you. Keeping in mind, of course, like you said, we're looking for people who come with bags of money in hand.
Councillor Audia Kelly and then Councillor Ramadez.
Thanks, Mayor Milligan. Just to clarify, I think we are clear that site 902 would require being attached to the fire hall. But if, and that would require all the same code that the fire hall would require. So the other site, not counting site 3 as a potential, it could be detached, which Director Jansen would then, the post-disaster and all those things that apply to the fire hall still apply to a detached building on the same site or no?
Thank you, through your worship, to Councillor Audia Kelly. Detaching would detach that requirement. However, under what we showed you in the test fits today, obviously segregating the access and the programming needs of both sites would be critical.
Councillor Ramadez.
Thanks, Your Worship. I've got a few questions. I'll ask those questions later as we go around the table. My first thing is in terms of timelines too, like this is definitely going to be a multi-generational decision as we have spoken through the evening. 2026, like, is that a self-imposed deadline or did it come out of some kind of work in the past? We seem to be very fixated on that year. So I just want to ask why 2026?
Thank you, Councillor Ramadez. It is it has been discussed at the outset of this project as a target, appreciating that the existing service is at a reduced level. And so focusing on priority to construct that fire hall. That said, the existing facility is subject to temporary occupancy permits that would need additional architectural work to extend that, because we've moved into a facility that is absolutely not post-disaster standard, and there's been some compromises to allow that because of its temporary nature.
And just reflecting on Councillor Hamilton's question about the conversation with the school district, and I'm certainly not trying to paint them or any other party into a corner, but if that doesn't advance as part of a co-use conversation with 902 as the fire hall site, it is not a dead conversation, as I understand.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. The school district has actually been with us in conversation since the beginning of this project. They've been really great partners in the dialogue. They're very interested in moving their light industrial use out of the downtown core. It doesn't suit their needs to be there, and they also recognize the need to be community partners and be a part of the redevelopment of that area. They also have the renewed neighborhood learning center on that site, that they've heavily invested in that. And the provincial policy around that does want to see development of commercial and community uses surrounding it. And so there's many reasons why they would like to leave that site. With the timing, it's absolutely not a dead conversation. We've had several conversations with them and anticipate more. They would need to identify a new site. We've put them in touch with the RDEK and their potential fire hall site as well, outside of the region. But they're certainly interested, but securing funding for a new maintenance shop and relocating that, and also requiring the site disclosure. As we know, it's a current use of a mechanical shop that would require environmental assessment. That it's way outside the timeline for this, but certainly a very real opportunity for downtown revitalization.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? Councilor Ramirez.
Thanks, Your Worship. I know many of my colleagues went to Creston and we did a nice little site visit, but just in the interest of the community here, if someone can actually explain why Creston lost the first referendum, like why the referendum did not pass the first time, in the interest of the community here.
Well, it's a very fair question, and I'll try to summarize, and I'll ask others to chime in. I think ultimately they put it down to a lack of communication and engagement, such that the community didn't clearly understand what they were voting on, even in the referendum question. And as such, they regrouped, and we've copied their model. And I want to take the opportunity to thank our community working group for the work they've done and the effort they've put into this project. That was modeled after Creston's revised process, and because they were careful, as we are, in choosing the right people in the community, that it provided a much clearer picture to the electorate when it came time to vote, as to what exactly they were voting for and why. That's sort of my summary.
So it just came down to good communication between the council and the
communication
community.
and engagement. Absolutely. Yeah. Councilor Nixon.
I think we had Mayor Toyota present to us at AKBLG in 2020, I believe, and that is a good summary of your summary is good, but I think there was also a group of people in their community who did not want to spend any money whatsoever and didn't think that they needed a fire hall at all. So they muddied the waters, and they spread as much misinformation as they could. So I think that we definitely need a new fire hall. I think we're being very transparent. I think this is a completely different situation than Creston's first attempt.
But thank you for that. I think you're right, and I think, but even then, they chalked it up to, in the face of that noise, they weren't communicating clearly enough the town of Creston's position on the need. So you're right, absolutely. There was a core of people who were very staunchly opposed, and they found themselves actually being quite reactive to that group's pushback. And they said that they acknowledged that was a mistake as well, that having a clear vision, ensuring the community understands that vision, and staying on message in terms of what that vision is, was a key component of their success the second time around. Further,
This is not a policy question, Your Worship, just a more technical sort of a question. I was intrigued with the 0.7 acres on the parking there. I was just wondering, like, when you look at the summation, right, coming out to 1.5 acres, like I'm just wondering, like, what's the margin of safety on all those things? Like, if I didn't have 0.7 acres for parking, let's say, I only had 0.3 acres. What's the impact? Like, is there some kind of a margin there that we are thinking about, or 0.7 is absolute and cannot be any less than that?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Councillor Ramadas. I'll just make one comment and then pass it over to Susanna online here. Those numbers that we presented, those 0.7 and how we arrived at the 1.5, that allows us to select a site first. And then you go into the test fit, and there's margins where you can be flexible. So a site could be 1.5 or 2 acres, but it could be elongated and have very low depth, and then it wouldn't be feasible to construct a fire hall. So that breakdown was used to select a site, and then as you do the test fit, they look at the shape of that site and the access and all of the criteria around that to then determine the exact amount. So I'll pass it over to Susanna. She did speak to, and in the report there are details of each of those test fits at each site optimized for a fire station, what that parking size or the turnaround size or the driveway apron might look like. So Susanna, over to you.
Yeah, so 0.7, I gotta reiterate, is not just parking, is site use as well. So it's the aprons in front of the apparatus space, in front and behind. The turning radius is the aisles that have to be used to accommodate trucks coming in and out of the building and on the site. So that's an additional to the parking. So if we take a look at a typical fire station, again, the shape of the building that you saw in all the test fit, that's pretty industry standard. So there's an apparatus bay, and then there's an admin residential quarters. So we're using that from past experience and also industry standards to lay out a site. So when we look at that, and then we look at all the auxiliary space that has to go in front for access to and from the building on various sites. And again, Director Jensen's correct, like depending on the shape and context of the site, it might be a little bit different. So it's not just parking, but parking does dictate a lot of it. If you have 30 stalls versus 10, obviously that area is gonna jump. And in terms of a margin or a factor of safety, if you like to call it, between all of that, it's pretty tight because we base it on previous projects and our knowledge of what these requirements are in and around the site of a fire station. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Thank you, Susanna. Further discussion? Councillor McCausey.
Thank you, Worship. I think all I really want to say about this is at this point is, one, I appreciate the depth that this report brings to it. I certainly have learned a lot more about those two sites. In fact, I think I may even have changed my mind and from what I had originally thought was going to be the right location to now. But be that as it may, speaking specifically in the moving forward, spanner or no, the process to get here to where we're actually considering building a fire hall has taken a very long time. I had my first conversation at a council table in, I think, 2009. 4 or 6 weeks on this is a tiny fraction of the total time it's going to take from the start to the end of creating a fire hall. And taking the opportunity to have a look at that and perhaps not disrupt an important existing recreational asset in the community, I think there's value in that. Having said that, I would not want to stop the process moving forward. I think we should continue to move forward to the December 12th and further investigation and so on. But I think it is worth the excuse me, investment in time and money to at least have a good look at the IHA opportunity.
Thank you for that. On that note, sorry, Councillor Ramadas.
Sorry, Your Worship. I'm was what Councillor McIsaac said just resonated with me. The loss of that recreational space is going to be a big factor in our discussion going forward. If there is one piece of data, if staff could bring during the course of the next 2 weeks or 3 weeks, or sorry, 6 weeks, would be like, what's the usage of the ball diamond in Prentice Park? I don't know if I've seen the number in the reports, unless I'm mistaken.
Director Jansen?
Yeah, thank you. We certainly can bring that back at the next meeting. We have that information. The program at the adults, on the adult side, is fully subscribed with a wait list, and they maximize the use. Right now, there is no minor baseball programming, and so there is available space in the James White Diamond area. Should minor balls spin up again, and it does fluctuate every 4 to 5 years, they come back. They do get priority on the diamonds, and then it does displace the adult programming up at Prentice Park. So that's it. We'll make sure to bring that back in the next meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Jensen. So I will turn to Mr. McConnell as to next steps.
Thank you. Obviously, it sounds like council, there's some consensus towards this. So I forwarded just now into the chat the resolution that the mayor has drafted. He will need a mover and seconder for that particular motion. So I'll read it out. That council directs staff to engage with the Interior Health to investigate the possibility of co-locating the new fire hall adjacent to the Elk Valley Regional Hospital, partially located on Interior Health property, and that if the site meets the requirements for the new fire hall building, that this option be added to the list of sites for consideration for the new fire hall location.
Moved by Councillor Audie Kelly. Seconded by Councillor Schussman. Any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you. And it was a bit of a spanner in the end, wasn't it? Do we now rise from committee of the whole?
I'm thinking there's still a request for a staff recommendation within the document, and I'm not confident if Ms. Jansen still wishes it to read the way it does, or if she wishes to have it amended.
Fair. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Director McConnell. We are looking for a recommendation to bring forward as I'm thinking, we're still planning to bring forward an amendment report on December 12th, with Director Burdett. And so we're looping this in, this particular recommendation on site investigation funding into that process. So as I'm speaking out loud, I'm not certain that a recommendation is required, or perhaps it be amended to direct us to bring forward a report to simply a future meeting rather than the December 12th, because should the third site be removed because of the criteria, we still want direction to come back to you on site selection at the earliest opportunity.
Thank you.
So possibly just removing the date of December 12th from the resolution.
I can read out the recommendation then, that council directs staff to bring forward a report for consideration of site selection for the replacement of the fire hall to a future regular meeting of council. Or sorry, to a future meeting of council. We may set a special one.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor Nixon. Any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you.
And now I would ask for council to consider a resolution to rise and return to the regular meeting.
Moved by Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor Audie Kelly. All in favor? Thank you. You were looking at me with those big Robert Smith eyes. I was lost for words. And I apologize, respecting everybody's time. I'm going to take a 2-minute break before our next report from our manager of planning. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Rhodes. We'll go live again, if you don't mind. Welcome back, everybody. That great discussion on the fire hall brings us to item 9.4, Local Government Development Approvals Program. City of Fernie Development Approvals Enhancement Project, a report from our Manager of Planning, Mr. Similini, and a presentation by some gentlemen from McElhaney. Welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship, Council. Good evening. From a project that is just starting off in the fire hall to one that is wrapping up in our local government development approvals program. So as you're all aware, back in 2021, the city was awarded around $172,000 for development approvals project. We brought McElhaney in as a consultant to work with us on that project, and tonight they will be presenting on the deliverables of that project and some steps going forward. So without further ado, I will turn the podium over to Ruben and Brad from McElhaney to talk to you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Council, and Mayor and Council for the time this evening. I talked with a few of you just a few minutes ago. We could have wished to be earlier on the agenda, but I learned a lot about the city of Fernie in the last couple hours. So that was, I appreciate the conversation and all the comments from Council. What we'd like to do this evening is very briefly take a quick review of the projects or the deliverables that we prepared in the project that we've been working with you folks over the last 6 or 8 months. We were here in February of this year and had some great community consultation, and we talked with staff, had a bit of a discussion with Council, took all that great information back, and we submitted a report back to you folks in July on our engagement process. And then through all that engagement work, we started analyzing the information and coming up with some information. So today's presentation, we're just going to do a review of the development approvals review, our development and permitting software needs assessment, and our development application checklists. Those are 3 deliverables that are in your guys' package. The one that we don't have listed on here is a deliverable that was our summary of our engagement. I believe that's also in your agenda. So the first thing I'd like to do is I'd like to acknowledge moving forward, there we go. I'd like to acknowledge some of the team members here. Fernie's local development construction communities. We had great input from them at the meetings that we had. And interestingly, we had a fair amount of follow-up feedback from them throughout the year. The odd phone call, the odd email from them saying, hey, I've got a little more information for you, got a few more questions. And so it was great. Local housing societies were involved. We appreciated that. Derek and his staff have been awesome. Responding to our questions and helping out, giving information, and certainly City Council for all your time that you've been putting in on this as well. So in terms of the the development approvals review portion of the project, the following were our approaches to identify recommendations and map out the actions. We listened to the local development application applicants, collaborated with city's multi-departmental representatives. We had in-depth assessment of the city's existing development policy documents. We reviewed benchmarking studies and industry-leading practices. and we looked at the root causes that we did a root causes analysis. What we found out, and we learned this quite early in our program, is what's working well, and that was a lot of stuff. Effective implementation of development variance permit approval delegation bylaw, effective communication in the planning department, efficient and transparent planning application process, and the planning service exceeds in many cases expectations. So from our perspective, we thought, wow, this is great, and we're off to a good start. Ruben and I work in many municipalities, mostly in the Okanagan area, and there's a lot of communities that have got some big development approvals problems, much greater than what you folks have. So you're in good shape starting right off the bat. In terms of strategic recommendations, after we reviewed all of the information we need from the reports, we needed to understand the root causes for the issues and challenges. And there was 7 strategies that we came up with to address the root causes. A series of actionable steps were also developed into 3 stages. And those actionable steps were quick wins, which things we can do quickly, get a quick win. Progressive gain, something that might take a little bit longer, and then a transformative achievement might be a much longer term approach. And we also provided some key performance indicators to the implementation actions. I'm just going to quickly go through the recommendations. You've got them in your report. Strategic recommendation number 1, establish a holistic staff training and professional development initiative aimed at endowing staff with the essential skills, knowledge base, and resources to proficiently navigate and expedite the development approval procedures. This initiative will ensure that staff members effectively perform their duties and obligations, thereby enhancing the applicant's experience through the process. Now, that was the recommendation, and there was, as I mentioned, a series of actions ranging from short-term to long-term. We've just taken 3 of what we thought were kind of maybe the more important ones and noted them here. Staff onboarding guide for development approvals, an online learning hub, and an interdepartmental training and knowledge sharing sessions. So those are 3 actions that came out of strategic recommendation 1. Recommendation 2, develop and implement a cost recovery model for application and inspection fees to cover the actual cost of the services. Thanks, Ruben. Services provided. Again, just 2 of the key proposed actions: development and implementation of a cost recovery model, and development application generated revenue distribution matrix. Recommendation 3, foster internal collaboration and clear communication via a strategy that clearly defines roles and responsibilities, establishes a technical review committee, and standardizes procedures. And again, out of the series of actions that we came up with that are in your agenda package, development application technical review committee, and standardize the approval process and procedures. Recommendation 4, enhance the application intake process and develop comprehensive external communication materials to improve applicant experience and application quality. A few of the key proposed actions: a comprehensive development application toolkit, expedited review and approval for a range of applications, and certified professionals program for streamlining building permit approval. You may have some questions that come up. We can either take them as we go or hang on to them, and you can ask them later. Ruben did a lot of the work on this. He did most of the work on this. So when we get into the questions, I'm probably going to let Ruben answer some of those. Recommendation number 5, adopt a comprehensive digital transformation strategy to improve efficient and transparency, including a user-friendly online system and modern digital records management. And again, a couple of the 4 of the key proposed actions that we provided this evening. implementation of an online development and permitting software, digital transformation of the external and internal process for development applications, fully integrated public GIS mapping portal, and digitalization and online accessibility of all bylaws, maps, and other documents. Really, it's about getting your stuff online. Strategic recommendation 6, modernize Fernie's legislative frameworks and implement strategies that encourage infill and multifamily housing to align with the current development needs. Again, some of the key proposed actions: update bylaws that are aligned with the city's long-term priorities and objectives, promote and prioritize infill housing, multifamily developments, and pre-zoning and pre-approved plans. And the 7th recommendation, bolster affordable housing in Fernie through a fast-track approval system, public-private collaborations, and relevant policy development. And again, a few of the key proposed actions would be fast-tracking permit approvals for non-market or rental housing, public-private partnerships in housing and development, and affordable housing agreements. And there's financial considerations. It's important to consider the financial implications of implementing recommended actions, and the key financial considerations: upfront and ongoing costs, staffing costs, potential savings and revenues, and funding opportunities. So if we look at the development and permitting software needs assessment, our approaches were consult with the city staff to understand current challenges and identify the city's needs and expectations for the software, establish guiding principles and criteria based on the city's needs, research software providers and understand their services, and interviews with software providers in selected municipalities. Key challenges that we had with this is inefficiencies of a paper-based system, absence of an online GIS mapping portal. These are some of the constraints we had with the existing system. Administrative burden on building officials, bottlenecks in communication and information access, and underutilization of existing software systems. And key requirements for the software. After looking at some of the problems, and we need to identify what the key requirements for the software would be: online booking system for inspections, real-time application tracking for staff and applicants, internal electronic plan review and tracking, performance reporting and evaluation, and electronic submission and automated checklist verification. And recommendations for the next steps in the software is review of current software systems, refinement of software needs and requirements, budget proposal and approval, request for proposal, and staff training and ongoing monitoring. And the last part of our project was quite interesting. It was the preparation or the evaluating the processes that the city has right now, working with those a little bit, redefining them a little bit, and really coming up with checklists. Our approaches here were application process and requirements overview for each specific application type, a step-by-step guide and key considerations, and detailed application checklist. And the checklists that we prepared were for pre-application meetings, which is something that the city doesn't have right now. It was very apparent early on that that's something that your planning staff were looking for. Of course, we have the zoning bylaw OCP amendment, subdivision applications, development permits, development variance permits, building permits, board of variance, and temporary use permits. And just a bit of an, in the application review, there was 3 parts. The first part was sort of an application overview. So application definition, who approves the application, application process at a glance, a bit of an idea of how that process works, an idea of application timelines, application costs, and there were some other important things to know that were noted on there. So in terms of the part 2, the step-by-step guide, we wanted to make sure that there was a sort of a defined guide that the folks could follow. Steps to take before the application, the applicant prepares and submits the application. What do they need to do there? Verification of application completeness, staff being able to identify when is that application complete. Key considerations and tips for the applicant during the application process, and also an identification of roles and responsibilities for the applicant, city staff, and decision makers at each step in the application. And then part 3 was the checklist. And this was, again, equally interesting for us. And it is a little bit under, still under review. We just got this information to your staff fairly recently, and we'll be working with them to make sure that we've hit the mark on it. Detailed application submission requirements and comprehensive plan and drawing requirements. And those were identified very early as one of the big shortcomings. Folks that were making applications didn't really know what they needed to submit inside. Staff were sometimes not too sure, what they should be processing, how it gets processed. So these checklists are going to be really helpful. They're fairly comprehensive, and I suspect that the guys will be probably, knocking a few out. They might add a few of their own, something that we maybe missed. So they're going to be a little bit in flux yet, but we've given a good solid base to work off of to get these checklists refined and put together. And I think they'll be great in helping the community move forward in submitting applications that are complete, help your staff be able to process them correctly. And with that, that's the end of our presentation this evening, and I'd love to be able to answer any questions.
Thank you, Brad. I'll turn to council. Questions from council. Councilor Ramadas.
Thanks, Your Worship. Oh boy, Okanagan Planning Department must be was struggling from your comment there.
Well, there are some planning departments that struggle, and Ruben and I, our offices are beside each other, and very regularly we're
Brad, sorry, can you speak to into the mic, please? Thank you.
Yeah, there is definitely some problems out there. You folks are definitely probably in the top 50 percentile in terms of already doing a good job processing applications and having a correct process. So
thanks for that. I just have a question, Your Worship. Many of these recommendations, they really resonate well with many of us being in that particular session and, speaking to different stakeholders within the community. You said quick wins, right? Like, is there any timeline for that? Like, when are we going to see some action there and the outcomes?
Well, the actions are things that as council, you folks need to determine with your staff on what sorts of actions need to happen. The quick wins are ones that are easy to do. They don't take a lot of money. They don't take a lot of time. They're kind of quick and easy to do, and you get a sort of a quick win. And so that's what Ruben did a good job. He had this big long list of recommendations. And he said, this is quick and cost effective and easy. Here's a quick win. Here's a quick win. And then there's some that are going to take a little bit longer that you folks will have to talk about. Maybe there's a bit of a cost implication, takes a little bit longer. So those are going to be those sort of intermediate. And then there'll be some long-term ones that are going to take a lot of more time and more money. So it's kind of prioritizing how you want to get them done.
Mr. Baranowski.
If I can, to council and Councilor Ramadas in particular, recommendations out of this as recommendations out of other master plans and the official community plan have to be brought into alignment with council's strategic objectives once adopted, and then form how we plan out operating capital projects over the next 5 years as part of our financial planning process. So it is for us to synthesize and then bring those short, medium, and longer term goals to you. It'll be a good chunk of work over a period of time, sliding these in and integrating them as you work through the report. There are a lot of recommendations here, but I'm really encouraged because they do align with values that you have discussed and worked on, and stakeholders and staff have, both in terms of this and strategic planning more broadly.
Thank you. I was encouraged, and maybe this is for Mr. Similini, was it the Housing Accelerator Fund potentially will, if we get that grant, return some funds for a software solution?
Yes, Your Worship, that's correct. So one of the initiatives in that Housing Accelerator Fund grant application was the software implementation, to the tune of around $200,000 is what the amount was that we put in the grant. We haven't heard back from CMHC on that application yet. And I was going to mention actually the timing of this report that came back with the 7 recommendations didn't quite line up with Housing Accelerator Fund grant, but those 7 recommendations very well could have been 7 initiatives that we put forward in that grant application. So there will be some money in that grant application as well that's sort of not spoken for in the initiatives that we did list, that we could potentially put towards these 7 recommendations as well.
Excellent, because there is the number, you know, to both Brad's comment and to Mr. Baranowski's comment, there's a process of prioritizing here, but there's also, as always, a concurrent communications plan to make sure we're engaged with our building community, that they understand this is coming, that it's here, that we want their feedback, I know you're meeting with them tomorrow, that you know, they're informed about things like timelines and like the frequency, like the guides, for example. We talked about this last time. When these things are online and available, what is their refresh frequency, and how to the users provide feedback? Like, there's all those considerations, and they all take time and resources.
And if I may, Your Worship, and speaking to the checklists or the guides, being sort of a separate document from the recommendations document, I mean, there's potential for us to implement those checklists right off the bat. I mean, we can do a review of them and see if there's anything obvious that we need to change, but getting them into the public's hands and then working with the public to refine them along that process is what we're really looking forward to. And it should provide immediate relief if we do see some more complete applications coming through the door as a result.
Excellent. And sorry, just before I hand it over, good response to tomorrow's meeting? Do you have a sense of that?
I'm not sure if somebody was taking.
Yeah, Your Worship, Raquel is not here, and I've been away for the last several days, so I haven't had a chance to look at the response, but I would imagine that we have a similar response to what we had back in February when we did the initial launch of the project.
Good, thank you. Councillor Ramadas, and then Councillor Nixon and Councillor Shoesmith.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just was music to my ears hearing Mr. Similini saying that, you know, you can start implementing quick wins. So I have a procedural questions there. Does it have to come to the council for resolution, or is it one of those aspects like our previous discussion where the director has the authority to implement it without coming to the council?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Ramadas, I think to sort of elaborate on what Mr. Barnowski said earlier, I think that a lot of these have to do with sort of our strategic planning and moving forward with work plans, so we can implement these recommendations into our work plans. But I think there are a lot of recommendations there that are things that we can start considering, you know, things we just do differently in our day-to-day processes in the office without needing any sort of consultation with council, right? I mean, some of those quick wins are pretty simple, straightforward. And actually, some of those quick wins are things that we've already started doing or that are included as other parts of the project as well. Implementation of software, the checklists and using those. I mean, those are all sort of part of that document as well. So.
Sorry, Worship, just
further?
Super encouraging to hear that.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Shoesmith.
Thank you, Mayor Milligan. It's really good stuff. very cohesive, makes a lot of sense. The mere fact we're going through this is definitely kind of a panacea. We'll be continuing to proceed with engagement as we roll these out. Is there a plan for that?
Yes, Your Worship, through to Councillor Shoesmith. So tomorrow's activity with the development community is sort of the next step, where Brad and Ruben will be presenting a similar presentation to this, and then be able to have a discussion with that group. I believe that the housing societies are also invited and hopefully attending that as well. So that's sort of the stepping off point. But again, we're looking forward to just sort of having that back and forth and completely realizing that I think what they're looking for right now is that sort of pre-application and application checklist process. I think that's probably the most important thing to them. But we are looking forward to having a back and forth of, you know, here's what we think, and we can kind of take their ideas and hopefully implement them into those checklists. So it's a living document, so to speak.
Thank you very much. That's awesome.
Councillor Nixon and then Councillor Audia Kelly.
Thank you, Worship. So in April last year, CBC did a report on Kelowna and their AI chatbot. I mean, can you see this being integrated into our future? Because I went online today and actually went to the city of Kelowna because I had so much spare time and looked at their chatbot, and it's quite impressive what you can do with it so far. So I'm just wondering if there's a future for us as well with this.
Thank you, Your Worship, through Your Worship. That's definitely something we can look at in the process of implementing the development and permitting software system. That, you know, there are about 156 tasks that are identified in that review report, and we need to prioritize that. The chatbot, you know, is a great tool. You know, and so as far as my understanding, and is still needs more time to advance the capability of the chatbot, and in terms of, you know, the end users for that chatbot. And currently it can only you know, it can be used as a very helpful resources for if you're building a pool or a carriage house, and it hasn't been extended to other building permit applications. So that technology is still need more time to be developed. Whereas now, you know, our one of our priority is on that building permit software. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruben. Councillor Audia Kelly.
Mayor Milligan, if I recall, and maybe I misunderstood, but I thought the province was also developing some software to streamline and that they were going to roll it out. And as I recall, Kelowna was user testing their chatbot and then had offered, if it worked well, to share it gratis.
Yeah, Mr. Similini, do you know any updates on the province rolling out a software solution? I don't know.
Your Worship, I don't have any updates. I may be out of the loop on that, but yeah.
It is, and as you say that, it is a conversation that we heard several times at UBCM, but it was conversation. I don't know that anybody. Mr. Bornowski?
Your Worship and Council, might that have been the data sharing and software for tracking short-term rentals versus long-term rentals and
No, it was the
accommodations? No,
permitting
actually
software.
development permitting process.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
thank you. My apologies.
No.
Sorry.
If I can comment on that, we are at a point now where we need it now, and we, you know, if it is coming, that's great, but the faster we can get something implemented and working for us, the better.
Yeah, which to Councillor McIsaac's point made blithely is exactly on point. We can't afford to wait. Councillor Ramadas.
Your Worship, I believe I heard it as April or May of 2024 at UBCM.
Okay.
Yeah, somewhere in the middle of the year.
It's already feeling beyond the horizon. Excellent. Any further questions? for these gentlemen. Well, thank you very much for the update, and yeah, very pleased, as I'm sure our building community will be tomorrow, to see it moving ahead. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And just a follow-up comment on the chat bot, Kelowna spent a boatload of money creating it. So now that they've got it somewhat perfected, you guys can move in and get it for a quarter of the price.
Councillor Schussman.
Yeah, that's one of those things. It'd be nice if, you know, everybody else did it first and then we got it for free.
Yeah, just to reply to that, I know that the interview, which was done in April with Chris Walker, was they were going to provide for free across Canada. So, yeah, that's what they said. And it is from the provincial money. It's from the, hold on, it's the same program. And it was 350 grand. So,
okay.
If I may, Your Worship, I just wanted to give kudos to the McElhaney Group. They have been excellent through this process. It's been like, I mean, you can see in the reports how comprehensive and well written they are. But open to me. I think we met once every 2 weeks, like clockwork, and the meetings were concise and great. I mean, great to work with them. So yeah.
Well, excellent feedback. Thank you, and thank you, gentlemen. One more question, Councillor Ramirez.
Will be brief, Your Worship. Any chance we can get the invite forwarded also? Like, I have some time tomorrow if I can.
Sorry, get what?
The session tomorrow is it?
Yeah, Your Worship, we can do that. And I think originally, going back to the February sessions, we were a little bit hesitant to invite council there because I think it was designed to be sort of a no holds barred type interaction with the development community. And I don't think we wanted the feeling of the development community to hold back because there was potentially counselors in the room that, you know, but with that said, I think we're past that. You know, we've got the reports written. So if you'd like the invite, we can have it forwarded to you.
I don't think they held back.
No, they didn't. No, and it was good. It was healthy though. It was healthy. Like I said, it was all part of the process, and we appreciate it. It was I don't want to say hard to hear, but because we already knew that, you know, we already knew that we had issues, but it was a really good, wholesome process, I think, and I'm thankful for it.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. And I don't mean to rush you at all. Sorry, one last comment, Councillor Schussman.
Thank you, Mayor Milligan, for indulging me. I'd just like to thank staff for undergoing that. That was a pretty tough thing to jump into, and I appreciate that they took the effort and had the courage to do so.
Well, and I'll hand it to Mr. Simolini. He's been coming to our housing meetings, and it's been a lot of taking it on the chin until at the last meeting we sort of said, this is meant to be solutions oriented. Let's stop admiring the problem. And it actually changed the dynamic, and hopefully that holds. So yeah, kudos to you, Mr. Simolini. You've been pretty brave. On that note, thank you, gentlemen, Mr. Simolini. So we move on. I'm again sorry, and we're going to skip council reports. We're going to move on to our resolution to close.
I would highly recommend.
First, our resolution to extend.
Consider a motion that the meeting be allowed to continue past 10 p.m.
A mover, Councillor Hamilton. Seconder, Councillor Ramirez. Discussion. All those in favor? And then I'll ask for a mover and a seconder for this resolution. Sorry? Oh, did I have an opposed?
Sure. So the staff recommendation is that the meeting be closed to the public pursuant to section 90 sub 1 sub C of the community. I'll repeat it.
Yeah, thank you.
That the meeting be closed to the public pursuant to section 90 sub 1 sub C of the community charter, as the subject matter being considered at this time relates to labor relations or other employee relations.
A mover? Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor McIsaac. Any discussion? All in favor? And we will relocate to City Hall and council chambers.